Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, along with our guest today, Andres Barbosa. He's been here 3 times, right? Hat trick?
Today could be the hat trick, correct?
A hat trick. Podcast 131. Actually, Andres asked to come and just not say anything, but just kick me under the table with all the mistakes. Why don't you tell him the Andy mistake?
And the last one with Ilya, you were basically talking about how tough it was for Andy Murray to break through in the Big Three era, but you kept mentioning Andy Roddick. You must have had Andy Roddick in your mind.
Sleep deprivation. Senior moment.
Was it the hat?
It might have been the hat. It was a cold day. If anybody looked at that episode, I was wearing a winter hat. What we're going to do today, please kick me under the table. I know I make lots of mistakes on these things. Got to get my glasses on. I have some notes on the men's final. We're a little bit late talking about the men's final, but I do think a point is once the match is over, not too many people talk about it. Novak Djokovic, Stefanos Tsitsipas, 2023 Aussie Open, 6-3, 7-6, 7-6. Tiebreakers were 7-4, 7-5. Now, I think some people might tell Andres and I to go sit in Section F and eat some popcorn. I remember meeting your friend Steve, correct? Has the poker mind?
The online poker great.
In Las Vegas years ago, I was told that if the match was already in progress, bet on the person who's won the most games. So say, for example, someone's up 7-6, 2-5. So they've won 9 games and lost 11. Bet on the person who's won the most games. I don't know if they still do that, but I always thought that to be interesting. The Aussie Open, we'll go fast on some of these things. The organization claims to be a leader in technology when it comes to match analysis, and I wouldn't know, but it's very, very impressive. You get online and everything you want to look for. One of our former colleagues started off as a student. You've heard the story. He progressed with us over a 7-year period. He's progressed. He's the CEO of Tennis Australia, Craig Tiley, tournament director. Craig Tiley used to be able to use 2 CT120s, Bill Jacobson's laptop, the electronic pioneer, the godfather of charting, Bill Jacobson. Go back to the podcast that we dedicated towards him. But I had 2 units, and Tiley used to be able to chart 2 at a time. I'd like to think that Bill influenced the technology that they're using on Tennis Australia. Commentary, they go point by point, simple sentence to summarize the end of each point. They have rally analysis. Craig O'Shaughnessy, Brain Game, he's put a big emphasis on this. The breakdown and the rally, Andres, everyone. It's the point separation, 112 for Novak, 94 for Stefano. Ball was in play, the exchanges, 4 ground strokes, 61-58 Novak. 5-8 exchanges, 28-14 Novak. Over 9, 23-22 Novak. So that was a red zone confrontation. Stroke summary. And Andres is taking some notes. We'll go through some points he's going to make on this, but get through the numbers here. Ground strokes. Novak 408, Stefano 417. Overheads 5 each. Passing shots 8 for Novak, 4 for Tsitsipas. Volleys 5. This is throughout the whole match, and obviously you can break it down set by set. 5 for Novak, 9 for Tsitsipas. With approach shots, 2 approach shots for Novak, 1 approach shot over 3 sets. Now again, there's a human element to charting. For example, was it a forced error? Was it unforced error? Seems to me there was more approach shots than that. Now, drop shots, 5 for Novak, 10 for Tsitsipas. Lobs, 10-8, 10-8 Novak. Just a stroke summary from set number 1. Novak hit 1 overhead. Stefano 0. Volleys 1 each. Approach shots 0-0. One thing with junior players, say if we were just going through these numbers and we were saying that the numbers were for junior players and we weren't saying they were for 2 players whoever wins the match ends up number 1. That was on the line. I always mention that Sampras didn't really influence going to the net. So in Sampras, his last match played U.S. Open, won 104 matches in a row, came to the net, excuse me. You can kick me right there. It was a mistake. He came to the net 104 times in one match. Some kids don't come to the net 104 times a year. But kids today, I would say, are looking at the pros going, why work on your net game? With court vision, coming back to Tennis Australia, shot placement, the examples, like where did the aces land? First serves, where did it land? Second serves. You could look at the trajectory. They give you the RPMs for spin, the kilometers or the miles per hour. Just have to convert it for speed. More on numbers. Aces, 7. I was going to say 7-15. Incorrect. Kick me again. Novak 7, Stefano 15. Double faults 3 each. First serve percentage 66 for Novak, 65 for Stefano. First serve 1, 82% for Stefano. Slow down here. 82% Novak, 72% Stefano.
And that's points won?
That's percentage. No.
Percentage of points won first serve.
No, it's actually points won. Slowing down here. We got a timetable today. Second serve, 62-51. Number of points won. Fastest serves, interesting, 204 in kilometers. For Novak, 211 for Stefano, 122 to 126 miles per hour. So Stefano, a little faster serve, biggest serve. And again, you can go to the website and look all this up. I want to get into this talking about it as well. The average of the first serve, 114 for Novak, 113 for Stefano. Second serve average, 87.6 for Novak, 96.6 for Stefano. Overall winners, 36 for Novak, 40 for Stefano. Return winners, 3-0, Novak. Unforced errors, 22 for Novak, 42 for Stefano. Break points won. It lets you know a lot of things were done well when there's so few break points. Novak won 2 out of 5 or 40%. Stefano 1 out of 3, 33%. So net points. Winning percentage, 67% for Novak, 71 for Stefano. Attempts to the net or appearances, 14 for Novak, 10 for Stefano. Passing shots, 22 Novak, 14 Stefano. So it's different really. So Novak, what's different is volleys to approach shots, volleys with approach shots. I have down Novak with just volleys, 10% of the points for 67% winning. If you go over both, he's down to 7%. Again, flip-flop that. I'm making all these mistakes, so people have to really pay attention.
I think you're going to bore the audience with all these stats by the time you actually get to analyzing them. So let's get to analyzing that match already.
No. I'm not. You got to Tom Brady. You got to embrace the boredom. But it is true. Junior tennis players, they have to do their schoolwork, but do they actually study matches? So with just volleys, just coming in with volleys, 7%. Coming in with both, 10%. Stefano, he won 71% combined with volleys and approach shots. It was down to 5% just with volleys. With the receiving points won, 32% for Novak, 22%. And you have to go through it. It's all there, first serve, second serve. I'm not giving you all the numbers. But this is quite a few. Of the 206 points, 112 for Novak, 94, 54.3% for Novak, 55.7% for Stefano. The points being broken down. Nadal and Federer for 10 years in a row went into the U.S. Open. So you figure the U.S. Open basically starts around September 1. So 8 months of matches leading up. 10 years in a row, they were both in the 55 percentile. 55.2, 55, not 54, not 56, but 55. So the margins are close. In pro tennis, they'll call it a hiccup. A hiccup here and a hiccup there, and you get your serve broken. Now, this is a great exercise. This gets us away from the numbers. Go to YouTube, type in men's final, Aussie Open 2023, Djokovic versus Tsitsipas. You just watch the points itself. I didn't take the time to do the math. It'd be quite difficult to do that at 3 point. If the ball's on the string 3 to 6 milliseconds, how long was the ball actually on the racket during the match? But you can watch the match in 23 minutes. So we watched the match together as a group. I've watched the match 4 times.
I think the length of the match was what, like 2 hours 24 or something?
It's a number I don't have down, but that's something that would be of interest to. But what I did with the juniors, first of all, I got up 3:30 in the morning, watched it live, and then I went back and I watched it 2 different times at 23 minutes. You know, you get on a treadmill, okay, I'm just going to watch this match, boom. And I had the juniors watch it, and I said, no pen and paper, just look right at the screen, and then I narrated it. I said, okay, let's go through this. And then in going through it, you could talk about the geometry court, the stats. Again, it's not to belittle these 2 players. Obviously, I mean, I do have a problem with greatest player of all time, but obviously, tennis history is very complex. So the winner, Novak, 22 majors. What a fantastic career. With that, but going through it in our world, it's a language. This is how we're going through it: the red zone, yellow zone, plus, minus. And so you want to really have the juniors not have an awe factor. And now we're getting to where you can stop kicking me under the table. Stefano, I'm watching it 3:30 in the morning. I just, right in the very beginning, I go, no, don't do that. And he's behind the baseline, not that far behind the baseline. Overall through the match, further behind the baseline than Novak, but he's running around his backhand. Now, I'm not going to call these guys clowns, but I do say clones taught by clowns. Everyone's playing the same. The net's 39 feet away, and you're running around your backhand when you're not in an offensive position. The late Nick Baltieri, great deal of respect for Nick, and he worked with players' strengths. You think of starting with Jimmy Arias, Krickstein, Courier, Agassi. The big forehand has been around for a long time. Little Bill Johnson playing against Bill Tilden in that era. But I don't buy into the fact because of the strings today, you can't go to the net. Of the group from Baltieri, Arias, Krickstein, Courier, Agassi has the most majors, correct? So, I mean, it was just of those, Courier has 4. I think it's 7-4. Could be 8-4.
8-4.
8-4. Our fact checker is here. He just kicked me. Brad Gilbert. Love to listen to Brad Gilbert.
You gotta specify though, because Nick would claim that he had the Williams and Sampras as a part of their number ones in the stable.
Oh no, that's true. And he had 10 number ones, but just of the guys that you think of as going to rip forehands early in the days. Gilbert, Agassi's backhand is a gift from God. Vic Braden once asked Agassi, why don't you come in more? You get the people so far out of the court. And Agassi's answer was, have you seen me volley? I think also steps. That's another thing to number. How many steps are they taking? And, that can be measured. I've seen it done where they have the graphics now where they actually just show you where the player moved during the course of a point.
Makes me wonder, during these matches, if you're a coach in the box and you've got all these stats readily available, what stats would you really look at? Because, you just went through a bunch of notes here, but if you're going to go coach your player quickly as he walks over to his towel, you've got to process a lot of information really quickly if you're going to give a little 10-second little coaching tip. So it makes me wonder, if I was in the box, how much of I mean, unless it's a particular thing that I see with my eye, I think then maybe I'd access the numbers. But it seems like I don't know how easy it is to process all that information.
Oh, and then say Philippus is a world-class player from yesteryear. He's in the booth with Tsitsipas. What does he bring to the table? There was a little segment on the coverage of the Australian Open where he was saying it's a bunch of rubbish, stats with the tennis analytics department, and what the theme of what the plug was is, hey, this is really neat stuff, and Philippus says I really need to be open to this.
I mean, I'm not questioning the stats. My question is, if you look at other sports, let's say that have embraced stats, I guess baseball would be the one that might be checking the most stats in game, whereas let's say in the NBA, stats have changed the game in the sense where the 3-point shot is now huge. But, does a coach on the sideline follow the stats mid-game? That seems like more like a general manager's job to like analyze the stats. So makes me wonder here, let's say like as a developmental coach, the stats are huge to be working on players, games, constantly understanding the math about coming forward. But I'm just curious, let's say if I'm in the player's box and I've got 5 to 8 seconds to spit out a command, would that iPad help or hurt me? I'm kind of curious. I mean, I've never had the access to see that information, real time.
Well, to me, the coaching has to be done obviously long before they get into the ring.
Correct. That makes a lot of sense.
But on the other hand, I mean, rain delays. There's a famous story where Courier's playing Agassi in the French, and Jose Higuera says, hey,
drift back on the return.
Exactly. Some of those things. I do put the numbers back into this, some of these notes, but the story behind the story. I was teaching tennis in Surabaya, Indonesia, and they had these lines that went all the way to the fence. The single side lines went all the way back. So I said, what are these for? And because of gambling, they said, well, some teams play singles or doubles, usually doubles, and they're playing that means that the one team can hit the ball into the fence. It's not out. So they can't hit the ball. If they hit the ball wide, they lose the point. And I just thought it was a great teaching aid, just like the 10 and under lines for hitting depth, 9 feet from the baseline if you hit over that line, or the sideline of the 60-foot court. It's great for keeping your approach out on the inside of that. But again, I'm looking at the TV and I'm just started yelling out, no. Certainly, I am a fan of or a student of Djokovic. Is not like I'm cheering against him, but let's pull for the underdog here. Let's pull for 5 sets. I think a lot of fans are going, I just want a great match. Let's go for 5 sets.
I applaud you for watching the match at 3:30 in the morning. I was fast asleep. So
jet lag for 2 weeks, watching lots of tennis. But I think of Ty Tucker calls it the fat part of the court. The Swedes used to draw a figure 8, a circle on this side of the court, a circle on this side of the court, and just keep the ball inside the 8.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because amongst all the numbers that you threw out at the beginning, I think you said it was between points in rallies between 4 and 8 shots. I think you said it was 28-14. And then you said when it was longer than 9, it was basically even.
Yeah, 23-22. You're right, 28-14.
So that would have, for someone like for Stefanos, would have made the stats would have then told him to play the middle part of the court as opposed to what seemed like to me even though I did not watch the match live, I did try to watch it on YouTube. But I'm sorry, but I'm just saying he was trying to basically structure a lot of the rallies when Stefanos had the chance, going forehand to forehand to try to avoid getting in that backhand exchange. So that stat that you told me about rallies extending beyond 9 shots, that's pretty interesting. I wonder if you knew that.
Well, I think another point you made up too is, do you actually know it while you're playing? Certainly, do you know it when the match is over? Do they really go back through the match over and over again? First of all, on the surface, I mean, he's in 2 tiebreakers. So if we go, hey, anybody's going to be thinking, I'm pretty close. Another thing is that, hey, I won 45% of the points. So, I mean, hey, I'm playing to be number 1 player in the world. But I always tell players, if you could put a crystal ball on it and you lose the match. So now I've got the notes. Going in, they were at 12. It was 2-10. Tsitsipas had won 2 out of 12. Braden used to say that Borg and Vilas, mail in the result. Borg and Vilas is that Borg is a better Vilas. Like, you lose to a guy 20 times in a row. And also too is that if do you have options? I was with Vic at the Easter Bowl, and he goes, hey, if you're playing somebody who's a little better than you at the baseline, you just have to mail in the scores because you have no options. Tsitsipas elevating the ball up high. When I was narrating it for the juniors, I go, that's an approach volley. That ball could have been taken out of the air. And that's where you go back to a Jimmy Connors hugging the baseline, and that ball goes up high, and he just comes in, takes out of the air, and he takes those stutter steps, letting the ball just descend slightly. So when he plays a conventional approach volley, you can hear the sound. He's driving it. The Lendl grid, the late Raul Fonseca, he was a minister, but he started coaching tennis full time in a sense because he coached his daughter. His daughter is a very good tennis player. She tied a Chris Evert record. That means in Florida she won 12s, 14s, 16s, and 18s. That's pretty impressive. I put words to it and called it the Lendl grid. Lendl did not design the Lendl grid. It was because Fonseca said, this is how Lendl plays. He's going to just break your legs down. I'm fitter than you are, and this is how I'm going to play. And we just take the baseline and we go AA, BB, CC. And when you're in the defensive area, way behind the baseline, you hit to A and A. A on either side of the center mark of the baseline. Then you can go to B. If you're in the neutral area, if you're in the offensive area, you can spread the court, you can drive down the line, you can angle, you can go on offense. But we're always preaching to kids, don't run around your backhand in the defensive neutral area so much that they don't think we think it's an option. It's a great option to run around your backhand, but do it inside the court. With Lendl, he wanted to win the French Open. Tony Roach was coaching him. Tony Roach said...
He wanted to win Wimbledon. He did win the French Open.
See, that's where you kicked me again. Kick me twice.
My foot is sore.
Kick me twice. He wanted to win Wimbledon. He won everything but Wimbledon. I'm glad you're listening. He's a fact checker.
See that?
So what Tony Roach told Lendl, he said, you're too greedy, you're too egotistical. You want to be number one, stay number one, and you want to put money in the bank. And he said, what you need to do, because he skipped the French one year.
1990.
And he didn't quite get it done. He was knocking on the door to win Wimbledon, but he didn't do what his coach told him. And I think that would be very difficult for players, but I think this can all relate to junior tennis players. Why don't you make the comment you said to me about Tsitsipas watching him play doubles?
Yeah, I was watching the Miami Open last year. He was playing doubles with Feliciano Lopez. And I remember calling you or texting you, one of the two. And I was shocked watching Stefanos playing serve and staying back while playing doubles. You know, and at that time, I think he was auditioning different coaches to see who was going to come in, be part of the team. I think it was Feliciano Lopez for a little bit. I think Engqvist was in the mix. And then I guess Philippoussis is the one that ultimately got the job. But
he's got a good last name. He's Greek.
I mean, I never saw him serve and volley once playing doubles. And, you know, again, I thought that was maybe Feliciano's desire to try to bring him to come forward. But, you know, the interesting part I have for you is, as you know, from your experiences, you know, let's not talk about changing a stroke, which that might take more time. Let's say if you wanted to work on his volley or whatever. But, I mean, is it too late for him to sort of learn how to serve a volley? I mean,
No, I don't think so. But I also think, too, is Nico Lopez, he's obviously a serve and volleyer. They're playing doubles. I think, I've been around it, at that high level, Craig Carton told me one time, this is about world team tennis. He said, you got to talk all day and say nothing. You're romancing the player. The player's the boss. Luke Jensen, in pro tennis, the coach is not the coach. You can't tell your player to go run 5 miles. They're the boss. So I really do think that too much of that, like say Lubitschek, listening to him, he say Federer was just, he said he was so coachable. He goes, you're the coach, you tell me. I'll do what you tell me. You're the coach. So I don't want to say, well, this is the way it is. But I do think there's way too much. The commentators, it's in my notes here, the commentators, I think many of them are edifying the players. They're being politically correct. Some of them are, again, romancing the players. They have so much access. It's amazing how many commentators get coaching gigs.
Yeah, I saw Pam Shriver join the mix now. She was now in the coaching box of, was it Vekic?
Yeah. Okay, redirecting. Tsitsipas, and he had some success redirecting. That's where you go back and you can study the match. But when you redirect, in other words, you're taking a cross-court shot and going down the line. Braden used to say that you're taking crooked to straight. The length of the court's an issue. The height of the net's an issue. The reflective angle, you're off by 1 degree. You can make your opponent run, but based on recovery steps, you have to take additional steps. You actually, and Braden used to say that when a player would go down the line, just say to yourself, hey, stupid. And you get there and you go cross court. Now, I find the vast majority of the kids that I coach, when their opponent redirects the ball, they just hope it goes out. They don't quickly get behind that ball, get in the corner, get there quickly, and take advantage of going back cross court. But it promotes east-west play to change the direction of the ball. And it also, psychologically, and even though Novak's backhand is great, is you could all go back and look, well, how many times did he just hit underspin to it? How many times did he loop to it? And then as far as just, okay, I'm good, I'm going to actually have some net appearances. With green light points, you're asking, can you teach that? Say, for example, Djokovic is serving, second serve.
Let me take a step here.
I'm going too fast.
I know you can teach it. I'm asking is how possible is it for a guy like Stefanos now at 24, however old he is, while on tour,
I believe he's 25.
While on tour to make these additions to his game? I mean, because it just doesn't seem like, he lost a French final to him. He's, as you said, he's 2-10 against him.
But
ultimately, you got to think unless you're just riding it out, hoping that Novak retires. I mean, it's and you can say, hey, I'm better than the rest of the guys that are still around.
Well, I think also that instead of changing your game, add to your game. That, so again, he's serving on the average 87 miles per hour, and say Djokovic is serving 40 love. Djokovic's second
87
serve.
miles an hour.
His second serve was the average was
Djokovic,
87.
Djokovic.
So Djokovic is 87. Just think, okay, he's up 40 love. Djokovic. It's a second serve. It's early in the match. I'm coming in. I love to listen to the commentators, but I think, okay, what would Gonzalez say about this?
But
Pancho Segura, what would he say about the match? What would Kramer say about this match?
But when you say coming in, let's say, does he really have the backhand drive there that he can come in, let's say off an underspin shot? That it seems like it's one of his weaker shots. Maybe he's gotten a little bit better now with Philippoussis, but it's not like something that he can actually transition to easily to get to the net.
Well, and also in going through this, I covered, I listened to at least 4 podcasts on this match, listening to what people had to say about the match.
And you watched the ESPN coverage, correct?
Yes.
And I listened to the one I found on YouTube had John Fitzgerald, Wally Masur, and Brad Stein, actually. That was the third guy.
No, I heard that as well because I have in my notes, Brad Stein, I was traveling with my son at one time, Brad Stein with the USTA, he was working with my son. Also, Wally Masur, I made a video for Wally Masur. I was okay, it's kind of interesting to hear what these guys have to say. And it's fun to listen to different commentators. And I think that's where you got to hang in there. But I don't think the commentators overall are that critical.
I mean, they're not critical, and they're not. There's not much history there. I mean, I watched at least 2 of Tommy Paul's matches. I didn't hear one time anybody mention the fact that it was almost 30 years. I think Courier won it in '93 with Brad Stein in the coach's box, and 30 years later, he's there with.
Absolutely great story.
With Tommy Paul, I mean, not even one mention of that. I didn't hear it anyway, so a little disappointing for the Brad Stein fan club.
So again, the green light point, it's not just when you're on offense, not just when you're up 40 love, you're down. And it comes back to your friend Steve, the poker player. He has a poker mind. I remember we had him play a young girl I was coaching who hit the ball pretty well, say in the 12 and unders. That's when it was, 12s. And he's going to find a way to win that match. He's going to take the role of the spoiler. Aggressive air margin, do the players really understand? Go to the net, win 2 out of 3. The combinations of red, yellow, green. I mean, do they break it down tic-tac-toe, 1, 2, 3? In American football, I always am trying to tell the kids, and I go way back when there used to be every time the quarterback and two backs behind him. It usually would be the fullback. I have kids go, I say, you need to go watch Larry Zonka. I know you're a Miami guy, Dolphins guy.
Yeah, it was funny you mentioned that because his sidekick, Jim Kick, was his daughter was a Still playing professional tennis, I believe. Allie.
Yeah, I was working with Vicky Duval when she played kick in the finals of the 18s. Winner gets to go to the U.S. Open. So yeah, a very good tennis player with. But I have juniors go watch Larry Zonka. And how I became a fan of Larry Zonka is I watched him play when he played for Syracuse. And I mean, he would just, Floyd Little was another superstar in the backfield, had a great NFL career, but it was like 3 or 4 guys on his back as he would go 10, 11 yards. It's just amazing. To me, boxing, another thing. Okay, Tsitsipas is trying to win that match like he had one arm tied behind his back. You got to be good on both wings. And his backhand's not that far off. You know, when it comes down to he runs around the backhand. His first impulse is he wants a forehand. You see in junior all the time. So now when he turns, he doesn't get a full turn, and he doesn't really get inside out enough. I don't really think that's so much a technical change. It's just turn and hit it. First time I saw him play, I was at the U.S. Open with Matt Clore, and he goes, hey, I was there to watch a few players play, and there's coaches I've worked with and such. He was with the USTA. So he goes, hey, let's go watch this kid play. And it was Tsitsipas, who's 17 years old. He's a great tennis player. He's got great passion. You can get on YouTube and watch him work out. Now, it's just how much information is in his corner. Coming back to history, Wawrinka, I think to say this, Federer was asked one time, if he had 3 wishes, what would they be? First wish is Nadal played soccer. You get a little bit of a laugh. Second laugh is he said, I wish I had Wawrinka's backhand. And a very smart guy, the Swiss, they asked Federer once, where do you keep all your money? He said, I'm Swiss, I keep it in the bank. His third wish is I would save it. That's a smart guy. If you go back and you watch from 2014, Wawrinka versus Djokovic, Djokovic seems like he's all over the net. The guy's very complete player. He can go forward. Now, Wawrinka stayed closer to the baseline, and he hit his backhand. He stayed, as we would say in football, here as a football fan, you stay in the pocket.
But this was the final of Australia?
2014, I think it was a semi. There's 2 matches.
Nadal won. He played Nadal in the final. 2
matches you can look at, but again, you can watch it in like 25 minutes. Maybe it's 30 minutes if it's more sets, but you can watch it very quickly. It's a completely different match. And I think that, the player's psyche is if you just, I think how you set it up, how you tell the story. I would sit down with Tsitsipas and say, hey, this is what your idol, Tsitsipas says his idol was Federer growing up. This is what your idol said about Wawrinka. He had 3 wishes. One of them is, I wish I had the backhand like Wawrinka. So we're going to watch Wawrinka play. And Wawrinka's got a few Grand Slams. He's got one at every place but Wimbledon.
Correct.
Right? And he stays close to the baseline. He just turns and just, he's got a solid backhand. I mean, in the French, toe-to-toe, he did great against Novak. The expression that he can penetrate the court, he can hit through the player. His backhand is solid. Jimmy Connors, how are you playing? I'm playing solid. Rocky VI, talking to juniors, be able to stay in there and go toe-to-toe. Boxers, my forehand, my backhand. Even though Djokovic's backhand, okay, the commentators have the checklist. So Djokovic's backhand is a little bit better, or it's better. But how did and once Tsitsipas decided to be a one-hander, that to me is okay. You want to be a versatile player. You want to be an all-court player. Did you do it out of image, or you hitting one-handed because Federer hit one-handed? But it's a shot. It's and you could be a two-hander. Wilander is a player in '82 when he won the French, and then in '88 when it's 3 Grand Slams, he added the one-handed backhand approach shot. I think that Wawrinka, just like Federer, he stayed in the pocket. In 2017, when Federer started using analytics, said he played the best 20 minutes of his life, and he beats Nadal. Then it came out, I should always listen to my father. My father said I was always chicken, just hit your backhand. But Federer running around his backhand to hit in Nadal's lefty forehand, not good. Running around his backhand, hit in Novak's backhand. His own numbers, the first time in the French, I wrote this article, Dear Mr. Roger Federer, Sir. Not to be disrespectful, and you can't just go by stats, but the numbers, I believe, were 17% when he came in. He won 73. So you increase the number coming in and decrease the number of points won. But if you listen to the Fed, and I'd love to listen to great players, this Fed Someone said, well, why don't you come to the net more like Edberg? He said, if I volleyed like Edberg, I would.
But he did. When he started working with Edberg, he did. I would say that there was a few years there, maybe when he was 27, 28, that he was not winning the amount of slams that he was probably used to. And you definitely noticed, at least I noticed, that Federer was now serving and volleying a little bit more, almost to just get these elite returners to do something other than just pound the return back middle and out rally basically Federer from the baseline. So that's where I would like to see some of the stats. I'd like to see how much more often he's. And again, like what you said, stats is basically who takes it. So if Federer hits an ace, but he was coming in, do they count that as a serve and volley? I mean, they should.
Yeah.
So basically, the one stat that you mentioned that I thought was crazy here that you told me is that Stefanos came to the net and volleyed 9 times, and he drop shotted 10. That's it's crazy that he wouldn't come in.
Yeah, it's very common today for players to hit more drop shots and approach shots. This is something that's in the notes here. Sampras Federer, 2001. Federer's 19 years old. It's 4th round. It's his first time on center court. Sampras won 31 matches in a row. Federer has 98 net appearances. Serves and volleys 88 times. First serve came in 61 times, won 72%. Second serve came in 27. He won 48%. Now, granted, they changed the grass. But also, it's kill or be killed. If I don't come to the net, Sampras is coming to the net.
Right.
But it's like Tsitsipas and Novak both agreed we are not coming to the net. Now, this is the way it played out for Stefano. It was 6-3, 3-all, and that's when he hit his first overhead.
That was the part I was actually watching.
It was
in the car on the drive up.
It was 6-3, 3-all next point. So over the very next point, he comes in, hits a volley. Now, he had come in within the first 5 games he came in, he was passed once. But it's almost like he's waving his arms, going, I'm not coming in. I'm not coming in. One of the comments I heard on a podcast was that someone said, Djokovic's just going to play the percentages. Excuse me, if you're going to allow me to play this way, I'll play this way.
Right.
He's playing Wawrinka. At one time, Djokovic, he beat Nadal 7 times in a row. And they asked Nadal, what is Novak doing so differently? And I think a lot of times it's not to belittle anyone's IQ by any means, but when someone's speaking in their second language, now you speak, 2, 3, 4, if you can count profanity, but
3.7.
So he's answering the question in English, and he says that Nadal says that's simple. Don't miss and be super aggressive. Don't miss and be super aggressive. So I think the matchups, I don't think there's enough coaching at the elite level. You listen to the commentators, and I like to listen to commentators, but how much is it really fact-based and go, okay, that really makes sense. So for me, you mentioned history, that's where I go, okay, the 2 Panchos, Pancho Gonzalez, Pancho Seguro, and Jack Kramer. Just take those 3. They've all passed away now, but what would they say? Like say you can serve like Gonzalez and you're doing really well. Serve, you hold, you serve, you hold. So you can be more aggressive. You've already got the hold. It's like, okay, the math is on my side. You go with Kramer, where he was the number 1 junior, and his father said, okay, now you got to learn men's tennis. Now you have to go forward. And it's changed. Like Federer says, well, the players today are just so afraid of a low volley. But come on, just once in a while. I mean, I think this is a mixed message, even though it was spectacular to watch these great players play. But I mean, 6'3", 6'4", they're physical specimens compared to the average Joe playing tennis. And then warriors, how much have they played? And when did they get into the game? And then the history and the background. Say John Newcomb, for example. He had a great drill years ago. Rally inside the baseline. Play a set where you can't go behind the baseline. Playing the ball on the rise. So that's where it's not very good to me to say, okay, I'm going to give Djokovic more time to track balls down.
What's interesting is that now I don't remember who said it, or I'm sure it was said multiple times over the years, but the basic idea, let's say if you were to come into the net 100 times and you win 55% of those points, I just think that at some point along the line, the 45% that you lose became so painful for the players, juniors, mainly juniors, I would say, that they stopped doing it. Thinking, oh, if I would have stayed back. I mean, you see that all the time at, let's say, recreational level with doubles. You know, you'll see someone miss a volley, and the person that was on the baseline will say, oh, that was mine. I would have had it. So I just think that from the developmental side, at some point, the numbers need to be stressed like you're talking about because, you know, especially at a junior level, you come into the net on a decent approach, they're probably going to miss the passing shot a third of the time. So basically, you only got to make 2 out of 7 volleys to have like a winning game plan here. So.
Well said, because most juniors, they don't have any experience hitting passing shots because they're not playing against anybody who comes to the net. Time for ice hockey. Wayne Gretzky recently said stats are for losers. They're talking about goalies. And the gist of it was basically...
A few days after the All-Star game was down here.
No, this is not that long ago. So and I don't follow hockey like I'd love to because it just takes so much, you know, I mean, like it's on every day now. If it's okay, I'm going to watch a game once a week, like when I was a kid. But stats are for losers. They're talking about goalies. He goes, how many playoff games have they won?
Right.
You know, can they stop the puck when it counts? That's where is the player at their best when the knife is at their throat. You know, that's where, you know, do they have good nerves? I always ask people, what would you rather have, a good serve or good nerves? I think today with the new rackets, I'll choose a good serve first, but you got to have both.
I mean, new rackets, come on. These rackets have been around for a long time now, Steve.
Well, I think that's true, but that is true. But then people say the strings have changed the game more than the rackets. What do you think about that?
I mean, sure. I mean, I can understand where, let's say, for a certain player where they might want to use gut versus, let's say a co-poly where for a little bit more spin. But I mean, when I was watching the match with Tsitsipas, I was amazed at how many times he hit a good serve that Novak was able to get the return deep in the center of the court and have Stefanos behind the baseline hitting the first forehand. I just could not understand, like what you're saying, green light point, that he didn't try to do anything else to upset the rhythm. Anything else, you know, it just seemed like he was just trying to go closer and closer to the lines. Whereas, you know, where you're mentioning where Stefanos was relying on now running around hitting forehands or more forehands, he did that, let's say, after the first set. After the first set that he was lost, I think 6-3, then he started doing that a little bit more. But Novak, at no point did it look like he was even thinking about going up the line. If, you know, and again, I didn't get to that part of the match. Maybe he did make the alter, maybe he made the change, but there's no stress in that baseline rally for Novak. Whereas if Stefanos comes in, I think it does change the dynamic a little bit because...
Oh, it changes it a lot. And then it does make it more stressful. I've got to hit to a smaller target. I got to thread the needle.
And now when you get involved in that baseline rally, if you're Novak, now I have to win this point because I was, you know, I'm not winning as easily as I was before. So, you know, it's a crazy thing that you always make the reference about there's not enough first base coaches, you know, and with these guys, like, you know, and again, there's been a strong infrastructure, I'm sure, with families investing time and money. But, you know, we can talk about your favorite French coach. If you know, where was he in the developmental process when Stefanos was 14, encouraging the guy to come forward and doing more at the net, and you know.
Well, that story with Patrick Monigulu is that he watched him first time on YouTube when he was 12. You know, flew the team in, and he just gives him a credit card basically, but he becomes a confidant, becomes a mentor, and you know, and that's where he's smarter than the federations. He's not changing who's coaching. It's great marketing for him. So again, positives for that, but that's where Joe Public thinks that he's coaching them.
Right.
Let me say this about the serve. So even though Djokovic is serving a little bit slower on first serve, a little bit slower on second serve.
He's serving great.
His placement, but the big thing is his balance. Tsitsipas, go back and look at the video. And it's not really to say, okay, Tsitsipas, again, tell us to go sit in section F and eat popcorn, but
falls to the left.
His toss is off, and when he lands with his front foot, his left foot veers off to the left net post. He ends up off balance. And a Jack Kramer word is Novak Djokovic, he return to serve is like a sledgehammer. It's just boom, he just pounds it right up the middle. I like to repeat things that, hey, I'm going to own that. Mackenzie McDonald, I stayed with us for a short time, and during the pandemic, 3 weeks, and I said, all right, I'm asking him all these questions. And some of our listeners probably heard this, so yeah, I think it's, we can't get juniors to listen to these podcasts. But the return to serve, I'm aiming to the middle. If they're staying back, I'm aiming to the middle, I'm going high. If they're coming in, I'm aiming in the middle and go low. But centering the return, but I really think that's a big thing, is that Tsitsipas ends up off balance off the serve, and Djokovic is on balance.
And it's crazy when you think about how well Novak is serving now. I forgot how many years ago it was that his serve completely fell apart.
Yeah. Again, he was working with Todd Martin at one point, and that just didn't work. Now, Djokovic, at one time, I read where he's spending more money on his tennis, spending more money on coaching than anybody in the world. He hired feedback, and maybe it was just for one Grand Slam. I'm going to guess it was for a couple. The famous Polish player became top 10 in the world. Said this is the biggest mistake he ever made is he wanted to be top 10 in the world, and he became top 10 in the world, and then he was not necessarily satisfied, but he wasn't as driven as he says he should have been. So I think he was more of a confidant from a financial standpoint, an advisor, but he did coach, feedback coach Lendl. So Novak said, well, he was asked, why did you hire feedback? He goes, I want to know what Lendl was telling Murray. And, certainly they have funny money. They can throw a little money around and say, okay, perhaps I'm going to get some secrets to this. So we mentioned kill or be killed. With the pressure wasn't really applied to Djokovic. And I think Tsitsipas said, well we're going to play on your terms. John McEnroe at one point said, you got to hit spots. And, you can't really argue with that, spreading the serve out to the left or to the right. But also, too, it's just a matter of playing serves to the middle and getting a higher percentage of serves in. And you serve to the middle just like in 12 and unders. Now the returns are going to come back to the middle. You want some 12-year-old to serve volley, serve body, and go forward.
Isn't that the famous comment by Sampras in the Players Tribune, where he always asked him the one big regret he had in his life, and it was the third set breaker against Agassi at the Australian Open, that he went out wide on the serve and he should have just gone up the middle. But he would have won that match.
And I think for us to be the Monday morning quarterback, it's not like we're second guessing these players, but to relate it to Joe Public, to relate it to juniors. Again, I think the Eddie Murphy, Saturday Night Live, dressed as Gumby with Spider-Man. Djokovic is Spider-Man. And Robbie Seguso, at one time, I think he was maybe 3 times voted the most popular player on the tour by the players. He's got that smile. And so Dave Anderson and I were working for him, and he owned an academy. It's now Chris Everett's. We're going through this and that, and he's talking about, like Borg and Connors, like, no, the guys today, what Agassi, what he's doing with the ball. And I said, well, let me change your thought process. I just asked him, because he beat Connors at Wimbledon. I said, Robbie, you ever going to tell your grandchildren you beat Connors at Wimbledon? But with that, Bob Brett, the late Bob Brett, the disciple of Harry Ottman, told Seguso, you're playing Connors. Don't ever make him run. Don't ever make him run. And that's where it's like, hey, it's my turn to serve. Years ago, I was in the stadium, so Stasi is playing Drysdale. Drysdale starts to come in on the second serve, returning second serve and coming in. Years ago, he always wore glove. And so then he started doing a little bit on the first serve. And the Stasi, who was taught by Tiriaki, waves his finger and he goes, no, you are not going to do that. I am serving first. You have to wait for the ball to bounce. I will get there before you. He just tells the whole audience. And it's just amazing with...
Before you go, it's you were mentioning earlier the greatest of all time discussion and your problem with Novak being gifted it. My problem is always just that basically the people that are making these comments have never seen maybe I've never even seen Sampras play, let alone anybody from a previous generation. And then, when you mentioned now Nastasi, I was thinking about the 3 Patos that I have met in my life. And they are all now deceased. Pato Rodriguez, Pato Ape, obviously the father of the Stefanos agent, and Pato Alvarez. And I used to hang out with each one in different capacities for lunch or something. And I asked each one who was their favorite, their greatest player of all time. Now, these are guys that have played against the top players back in their day. They coached, in Rodriguez's case, he coached Jose Luis Clerc. He coached Andres Gomez to his French Open title. He coached Masoud to his gold medal. I asked each of those 3 guys who was the greatest player they'd ever seen in their life. So Pato Ape said Rod Laver. Pato Rodriguez said Roy Emerson. And Pato Alvarez said Ilie Nastasi. So it's crazy that when we have all these discussions about the greatest players of all time, none of these guys, maybe Laver. Laver's the only one that's maybe mentioned. And then quickly it'll be a very, but that was an old day. Those were wood rackets. I mean, I know you've made the comment numerous times, but I mean, I think it's staggering when I watch the video of Laver Connors in Vegas when they played, just how good Laver was. I mean, and he was retired basically.
Yeah. Sanchez Casal, Emilio Sanchez. So he's got everybody's attention. I went twice to the program at their facility, and then once through the USPTA. And very quickly, he basically says Federer is our role model. And one thing they were critical of is he needs to play more approach volleys than swing volleys so he can get closer to the net. There's a lot of learning to take place. So, and he's coached the Davis Cup and coached the Olympic team. And he goes on and on telling you stories. He's got such a captive audience. They're listening to him talking about Nadal. He goes on to the best player in the world is David Nalbandian. He goes, if he's 10 to 15 pounds lighter and he shows up and he's just in the right mood and everything, he's the best player. He can beat both those guys. And Vic Braden used to say, on the perfect day, no one beats Lou Hode. So there's so much to say head to head.
He said this, Vic Braden?
Yeah, they play one time. But
Vic had Jack Kramer as the best player he ever saw?
Yeah, but also, too, is that a line from years ago, and Jimmy Connors, who got to spend so much time around the 2 Ponchos and Bobby Riggs, is who would you pick to play for your life? Then you got to say, well, what surface is it on? So
I heard that comment a lot from Connors when he was commentating back in the day. He used to say Chang, actually. At that current moment, it was Chang in the early 90s.
With so it's the thing. Who doesn't have lunch money? Who you picking if they don't have your lunch money? They like Nadal when he plays. It's like he can't afford lunch. He's got to win this match for lunch. So it's fun to go through that. Here, Sampras versus Agassi. Now Agassi had a great return. Obviously, everyone compliments Djokovic. Great return. Agassi was asked, "What's your legacy?" He said, "Well, I took it a step further than Jimmy." Jimmy was asked, "What's your legacy?" "I proved to people you just take it on the rise." And then Agassi said, "Well, I added to Jimmy, I can take it on the rise and hit topspin." And it all comes down to, one of the guys we trained years ago, Steve Young, was at a baseball park with Agassi and Krickstein, and they turn on a baseball pitching machine. And Agassi, who now has a son who plays baseball, he goes, "Yeah, how does this work?" He takes a baseball bat, swings it like it's a tennis racket. He's radical. They named a racket after him. They turn the ball machine about as fast as it goes, and he just runs forward hitting these baseballs. And the baseball players that are there just stop and stare. So Connors and Djokovic are from the backboard. Agassi is from the souped-up ball machine. But with that, Sampras, it's the baseball, it's the pitcher versus the batter. And Sampras would just say, "Yeah, I know you got a great return, but I'm going to come in, I'm going to make my volley." And there's a guy with, Pete Fisher coaching him and looking at old films with, I'm going to play the geometry of the court. Yeah, you're going to pass me a bunch, but the poker player, the poker mind.
It's that ability to be able to accept getting passed and realize that it's setting a tone for the match is I really think, a lost art now because nobody can handle one. It's like if they try it once and it doesn't work, it's
That's
failed game plan.
That's
basically.
where if you're really successful as a 12-year-old, it can be a curse. You can have the wrong grips, wrong swings, never go to the net. Here's a match to talk about, and I do think that juniors, you have a rainy day and say, hey, let's go through this match. Now again, Arthur Ashe and Jimmy Connors, 1975 Wimbledon, and Arthur Ashe said after the match, I learned to lob and learned to dink. He's 33 years old. Before that match, but I remember the story was he called up Neil Frazier, a former Wimbledon champion, and they told me he had to change his style to win that match. And you're the fact checker. It might have been the only time he beat Connors.
I wasn't born, but
Look it up though. He might have been. He had a losing record. You have a losing record. It's like okay, and that's what the Super Bowl's coming up, and that's what the Chiefs are doing, and that's what the Eagles are doing. What's going to work? How will this play? What will counter to this? And that's where high school football coaches are studying film. You have to send me your film from the game before, and vice versa. We're playing this upcoming weekend. I don't think that exists in tennis. Not even close.
The one thing I do remember reading about that Connors Ashe match, which by the way, 30 years ago that he passed away now. It's 1993 right now in February. So
yeah, I remember where I was. Years ago, it was they used to call it the Super Show, and all these tennis people would come together, and it was amazing how the reaction of all these tennis people were. It was called the Omni in Atlanta, and Arthur Ashe just passed away. Where were you?
I was playing tennis with a buddy of mine who's a Wilson rep now, Evan Garfinkel, and I was driving around, and I had my lights on as like to pay tribute. We went off to play tennis, and I forgot to turn the lights off, so my car stalled. So I had to get a jump. But anyway, what I was saying about the Ashe Connors match is that Arthur was so strategic in the sense that he wanted to receive first because he wanted Connors to serve into the sun. I guess the angle of the sun at 2:00 at 2:15, and I was like, wow, that's impressive how he had it completely thought out. So anyway, I mean, if you watch, what a beautiful serve. I mean, Arthur Ashe. I mean, I know you and Andy have put video of it numerous times on.
Yeah.
But that was such an elegant serve that would.
Yeah, Dick Savage just recently passed away. Of all places, he played tennis at Cornell. He wins Wimbledon, and he lived in Manhattan. Ashe lived in Manhattan at one point, and that was one of his advisors. That is where.
And no coincidence that Yannick Noah was advised by Ashe, and again, probably the other great serve from the 80s and 90s generation. So,
Dick Savage had a lot to do with tennis in Israel. And at one time in Israel, Vic Braden's book was a national book for the coaches. It's just so many things. I mean, I could go on all these little stories when you're studying the game.
These stories are a lot better than the numbers you were throwing out.
The stats.
The first 5 minutes.
Plus, I made 19 mistakes. You have to go back and chart how many times I made mistakes. I'm just trying to go fast. I got an idea, though. I think that what we could do is take a break. We've never done that during a podcast, and then come back and finish. With McEnroe's a baseliner. Douglas Down plays on clay. Obviously, indoor tennis. He wasn't, he's out there with Port Washington with Hopkins. So definitely, I mean, playing on indoor courts. But it was just accepted that you are going to go to the net when you used to play on the old grass at Wimbledon. So McEnroe, I'm playing Wimbledon. I got to serve and volley. A story of compromise is, and I think there's too much. I'm always telling young juniors, don't compromise, don't negotiate. This is the best way to do it. Just do it. You're not far enough down the line. You're not good enough. No compromise. Don't negotiate. Here's the math. Here's the science. Here's the logic. Just do it. Now, the fact checker, you could look this up, but I believe this is accurate. Roddick plays Rosetsky. First round Wimbledon, he loses. But the next year he plays Rosetsky again. But he's got the first round under his belt. He plays him in the second round. He's being coached by Gilbert. And Gilbert says to him, serve and come in on the next ball. Don't serve and volley. Serve, and big serve, then come in. And I mean, here's a guy who got the Wimbledon final 3 times. And when Roddick missed that high backhand volley to go up 2 sets to love, I think he could have adjusted his feet and played a swing volley. It wasn't that he just missed that one volley. He was known to be yelling in practice, "My volleys suck." And then but because he was the best American for pretty much for a decade. So it's not a matter of, okay, we're beating up on Andy Roddick, but information, core information. And then when you start to listen to the players, we've said it over and over again. It's like if you want to learn to play the saxophone, hire a teacher. If you want to get inspired, go to the concert. You can play doubles where it's okay, I'm going to serve, stay back, and then come in the second ball. I know.
See, that's going back to the stats. I'd love to know after that backhand volley miss that Andy missed in the second set breaker, how many more times he came into the net the next few sets. Be kind of interesting to see if he just relied on his serve and got a little bit cold feet coming forward. And then take it a step further. I know, like on Twitter, it was all over. Basically people, when Federer lost to a Novak in that 5-setter, and he had match points, and he came in on the approach shot. Yeah, and now people are second guessing. Oh, he shouldn't have come in on that particular ball. I mean, yeah, you can always second guess any point lost, but it seems it's magnified more than anything coming forward, and it just seems like it's going to discourage kids for a lot of generations to come forward because you're basically second guessed by any error at net.
I think digging for details. I don't think there's enough digging for details. Now, obviously, the top players, they have an entourage, they have a team. But if someone's playing well enough where they can afford a coach, I've said many times, if you can only afford one, you're better off as a pro player having a physio. But a lot of this information, a player can actually do it on their own. We've worked with all sorts of players. Okay, you're out of school, you're not in high school, you're not in college. Let's study the game. Insecurity. I've worked with players that are trying to step up where they can get out of challengers and play on the ATP, and they're staying with me, and they go out to Saddlebrook, and I go, here's this camera, put it on the fence. Well, nobody else does that, so I want to do that. Like, say, a Tom Brady. There's a fantastic clip on YouTube where opposing Super Bowl team, they have an unbelievable athlete in the backfield, and the commentator says, yeah, he's only going to get what they give him in practice and in meetings, what they do on the field and what they do in their own classroom. But Brady's going home, and he's just going click, 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 and he's just watching film. And he's looking, and he has the calmness and composure go, okay, I got this up my sleeve. When I really need it, and there's 2 minutes left on the clock, this is what this receiver is going to do. This is a pattern they're going to run. And, granted, in tennis, like a college coach, years ago there'd be just one coach, and there's 6 matches. 3 doubles, 6 singles. And even like, say, in basketball, okay, you got 5 coaches and they're looking at one court. So a lot of challenges in coaching tennis. But coming back to the compromise is practice. It's amazing. Wimbledon, and even though the grass has changed, the players don't train even part of their day during the year. The pro players don't train during a part of the year going, I'm doing this in practice because 6 months from now I'm going to be at Wimbledon. I do this every day in practice because I'm going to be playing on this faster surface. You just, well, yeah, we're going to play a few tune-ups, and they don't think about a grass court mentality until the next June rolls around, and they're going to play a few lead-up tournaments.
They always talk about the grass changing at Wimbledon. That was 2002, I believe.
Yep.
And you had Hewitt and
Albanian.
But then people forget that the next year, what was it, Federer and Philippoussis? And you had, it's not like it play. I'm sure it plays differently, but it still rewards the aggressive, big serving player. What was the name of the guy? Gilles Mueller, who beat Nadal at Wimbledon. You had Dustin Brown that beat. So again, it's quick to say, oh, the grass. It's not a clay court. It's basically, even though maybe at the end of the tournament, it's kind of a clay. It's kind of a dirty court because the grass has been pounded down into dirt. But basically, it's easy to say that it's a surface change. It's much more, in my opinion, a style change and players not feeling confident playing that type of style because you just don't. This doesn't make any sense when you look at some of the players that have made it to the finals afterwards. That you can't tell me that they wouldn't have any success coming forward if they were to do it.
The Delray Beach Open starting here in a few days, and many years ago I was here, and Brandon Flanagan, who's been on the podcast many times, and I've known him since he was 15 years old. So we go out to dinner with, several people that are they're players in the tournament. So we leave, and Flanagan says, Steve, you realize those guys were listening to everything you said? I said, yeah, what's your point? He goes, I just can't believe those guys are on the tour. They're listening to every word you said. And I said, yeah, but I have a completely different set of information. They certainly have information, but it's just
recycled information. And
but also
time.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. But also it's chit chat. It's surface information. It's not deep. It's courtside chatter. What do you hear when you go to a tournament? And it's amazing. You go all the way to the Grand Slams, and it's the same thing. Is that I always tell people there's two types of talk. There's small talk and there's fact-finding information. And many times when we're listening to commentators on TV, it's small talk. It's just.
I oftentimes wonder when I'm watching how much they prepare for these matches.
I consider myself to be pretty well read, and they're just, they're going off of Wikipedia, they're going off a magazine, they're talking about people they don't know anything about. Many times the person shows up, and again, don't get me wrong. I mean, you certainly got to be open to learning, listen to everybody. But Bill Tilden, match play and spin of the ball. What beats baseline? Net. What beats net? Topspin. So Novak, his passing shots weren't really challenged. But it's like, okay, this guy's better than me from the baseline. I've got to go forward. Here's a Rafter versus Agassi. And I remember
what year? What event?
I wouldn't know, but I just remember
it's just
this.
A random match?
I just remember this. We could look it up, and it would be guesswork if we found two identical scores, because they have the score of the match. Rafter said, such a humble guy, when I play Agassi, I just hope to get games. And I watched the match, and the first set was 0-6, but then Rafter won 7-6, 7-6. Okay? With John Isner, I've worked with 3 people that have wins over John Isner, and they were all 7-6, 7-6. Actually, Brian Wilson, at one point, he was sent to train with us from the University of Illinois, Craig Tiley, and a couple years later, now kids have their phone, and he beat Karlovic. I'm driving the van, and I said, Brian Wilson just beat Karlovic. And some kids said, yeah, but the score was 6-6. And this tiebreaker scores here, 2 tiebreakers. It wasn't because one player was dominating on the serve. Let's talk about one more thing. We'll take a break and come back. I'll just say one more thing, and then I could think we have time for you, how you want to wrap it up, and then we'll come back and finish this. Take our first time out in the podcast.
Look at the history behind this. I get to be the one that keeps punching and brings you back for more.
These podcasts, the great Andy Fitzell, he started them, and I said, well, will we take a break a couple weeks? He said, no, you got to do them every week. I said, okay.
What would you say about a break midway through?
I think he'd be okay with that. The one-hander versus two-hander. Actually, we have a player here whose father, I was out to dinner with him, and he's Swedish, and he played high-level tennis. I said, Percy Rosberg gets his phone out. He goes, he was my coach. And Rosberg coached Borg. He coached Edberg, and he told Borg, stay two-handed. He told Edberg to change. Changed one, didn't change the other. I coached a young guy, a Canadian, Shea-Tu Malampati. And I think it came down to tennis versus academia. And he's an orthopedic surgeon now. I remember he's Canadian, so I remember him coming to Florida, and I was working with a kid who was the number 1 player in Florida. It was just a practice match, but Shea-Tu wins the match. He liked to go forward. And I remember saying to Shea-Tu and his mom, the mom was the parent who brought him to his lessons, I said, you ought to think about your choice. If you really want to do it, you want to be a one-hander because it's a more versatile shot. And some people just laugh at that now, but so they came back and they said, well, we think the return to serve is more important than the approach shot. But my point is, Tsitsipas, years ago, he made that decision to be a one-hander. I mentioned Wilander, he added that to his game. But just to say, okay, I mean, he's a full-time professional. I mean, he's not worried about studying for his SATs. Is tell me the advantages of playing underspin. And does he know? Knowledge is power.
You're talking about Tsitsipas.
Yeah, so, okay, you take speed off the shot. When the ball's in flight, you're in movement. The trajectory of the ball is what determines the height of the bounce. So you're going to keep the ball lower. And then also, if you can play it cross court, the approach shot's coming on a diagonal. So it's very difficult to take the crooked ball coming in and pass down the line. And then you give your opponent less pace. So they get 50% of your pace from their pace. And that's where Uncle Vic, I don't think people have a handle. People are like, I really knew Vic. They don't have the handle on that information.
Courier has been very critical of Stefanos in the last year about how he doesn't have an underspin backhand. And again, when I saw that Philippoussis was coming in to work with the team, his underspin backhand was pretty good. I was curious, let's say, is that the reason to bring in a guy? Is that the reason why they were interviewing Feliciano to get him to serve and volley? And like you say, you see none of that. You see very little of that. It's just basically more of the same when it comes from Stefanos.
Yeah, I don't really like hearsay. Somebody says, "Oh, it's a lousy movie." Well, maybe it's a fantastic movie. They think it's lousy. Am I just going to go on their opinion? I did hear on one podcast that Courier said that Tsitsipas has to change his grip on the backhand. Now, the person who said it is a very colorful, dynamic personality for tennis, but she obviously does, and she says this. I don't know strokes. I don't know tennis mechanics. But that seemed like out of left field. That doesn't sound like Courier. I've heard him lately say, and Lendl's forever saying that I don't know strokes. I don't do that. It's like Brad Gilbert doesn't do grips. He said that one time. They're coach those. A lot of times the coaches, it's not like they're a third base coach coaching somebody who's about to score. They're coaching somebody who's already scored. They're coaching somebody who's already top 10 in the world, or somebody who's already been in the semis.
Courier is a great example, in my opinion. I love listening to him. I may be in the minority, but I love listening to him commentate a match because I feel like he does a great job of sharing with the viewer what the players are feeling on the court at that particular moment. And going back to what I mentioned a while ago, in my mind, he's got that computer in his head running scenarios and what's working, what's not. And again, I'm just curious, as if I was in that bench, how quickly could I process that information and relay it to my player? Obviously, if I get the changeover break and I get 90 seconds, I might be able to see, I would think that the most important stat that they could tell me would be that majority of the serves are going in this direction, the majority of the serve, or when the score is this, the serve goes this way. Other than that, I'm not really sure any of those stats can be digested quickly enough to really make an input, to really have an effect on the match. It could have tons of value on your off season or your training block weeks, any of that. But I mean, I'm kind of curious if that stuff can really be interpreted that quickly to make a change in a match. With
Courier, I spent some time, not much time, but coaching his niece and his nephew. His niece, I used to say, just think she's got more talent than the uncle. I mean, she played all these different sports, and she ended up, I believe she played at the University of Oregon.
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember that. I know another girl, I know her name. I blanked out now.
But his sister, Audra, Jim Courier, when he first lost a match, first junior tournament, they said he cried for 3 days. That's why he's Jim Courier. That's why he became number one in the world. I remember being told if there was a wheelbarrow full of money on the other side of a brick wall, Courier would just put his head down and go through it, where Sampras would step back and go, okay, I'm going to get there, but I'm going to go over or around the wall. Courier was just going to go right through it. I was told that when he would play an 8 o'clock match, his mother would get him up at 4, have him eat a really good breakfast, and then go back to bed. And I remember part of the real good breakfast was Raisin Bran, which is actually, if you do your homework, those raisins are just like a big nugget of sugar. But he's in the Hall of Fame. He was there when Roddick, it was just great. Where Roddick goes, I feel really good about Jim Courier being here because I'm not the only player who's in the Hall of Fame with a crappy backhand. And that's almost like verbatim. No, I do think that's why it's very good to listen to the players who've been there, and I think that's why it's good to have someone like that in your corner. They say experts in tennis, like the late Tim Gullickson was fantastic for Sampras. Now, I had a very good idea what Gullickson knew about technical, tactical tennis because he worked with Vic Braden. He came out several times, but at one point in his career, he went to work with Lansdorff, went to work with this guy and that guy, but everybody loved Tim Gully, where it seemed with his brother Tom, but to get a player to relax. So I really appreciate to have someone to be the coach, the human relationship of things. But it does need to be a think tank, and there should be a statistician, there should be a technician. Can one person wear all those hats? I would say no, but let's take a break, come back, spend a little more time in this match, because we've got to get a practice started. But what do you have to end this with? How many times did you kick me? Did you chart that?
I did not. You got this big board in the middle here that has a welt on my leg.
What do you have to wrap it up with, and we'll come back?
No, I mean, I guess I took a lot of notes here of all the stuff that you said there at the beginning. And actually, the one thing that stuck out to me was where you mentioned how Sampras didn't influence kids to come forward, despite his success. I mean, you could take it a step further. Martina Navratilova didn't influence anybody to come forward.
No, I mean, she won Wimbledon 9 times.
And
should have won it 10.
So again, basically, but who did influence? Chris Evert influenced. Andre Agassi influenced. Bjorn Borg. I mean, did John McEnroe really influence that many people to come forward? So maybe the point that I'm talking to you about, that basically the mentality of kids and how scarred they are when they get past or they miss a volley and they stop coming forward altogether. This could be just a psychological issue, and it's been going down for as long as tennis has been played. And it's just those certain players that are either well coached or wired a certain way that they are willing to accept coming forward and getting past. I mean, you mentioned Pete Fisher with Sampras. I mean, it's did Martina have someone like that was basically constantly encouraging her to come forward? And maybe they didn't say it the way you do, where they play the math, but maybe they're being taught that that's the way to.
Yeah, I like to repeat things when I've heard it. People need to hear this. So I listened to Lubitschek, and the questions vary, but a lot of times when you listen to someone like that, the story that is repeated. As a war refugee and then playing at Wimbledon and such. But he said that today children don't watch matches. And before, I was like, okay, you get a chance to watch a delayed match from Wimbledon. Like, this is awesome. And just be really zoned in on that. Right. I don't think that's the case. The Bryan brothers, and I heard people say this, and I think it's going to come true, is that they've retired, and so is serve and volley doubles. It's going to fade away. It's just, that might not be fair because, Rajiv Ram recently, he wasn't selected, if you can believe that. He's 2 in the world, and he wasn't selected for the Davis Cup team. And I know that along with Austin Krajicek, they just closed out a match. And I mean, the guy's 2 in the world. I mean, how could you not choose him to be on the Davis Cup team? Okay, fair enough, Sox won these titles and what have you, and who gets along with who. But no, I think that's a great point, that perhaps too much emphasis on the UTR, or before that it was tennisrecruiting.net, or I didn't like that, where you go to, I'm playing a 4-star. I'm playing a 4-star, it's going to be a really tough match.
Well, that's the other, I made another point here when you were mentioning the gambling in Vegas, where you after 2 sets, take the one with the most gains. By the way, you would have lost that Agassi rafter bet if you would have placed it. But what's interesting is that they haven't come up with yet for UTR or anything that's rating players. Rating points would be way more of an accurate reflection of levels than rating games, right? Like, I think you've mentioned in the past that, a match could be 6-0 and, in reality, the score could be, there could only be a 12-point differential in that matchup, and even less if it's no ad.
Well, like here in the last 6 months, okay, I'll go last month. Let's get the roster of all these players that have been sent by other coaches for us to work on. And the number adds up. You come here to just visit for the day. It doesn't seem like what we're doing right now is that big a number, but I can't really think of anyone right now that has very good shot tolerance. Who have I met? What juniors come here to visit the last 6 months has really high shot tolerance? Or better yet, I can think of one young Canadian boy. He's actually overseas playing for Canada right now in the 14s. I would say he has the best tennis mind of the last 6-12 months. That the guy has a quiet mind. He's composed, doesn't freak out. He's not regulated by the scoreboard. But that's very interesting. That I think there's such an emphasis on winning now. I mean, now I think it's wrong where a kid he's in the 5th grade or he's in the 12 and unders, and every match shows up on a computer printout.
Right.
But Andres, thanks for kicking me. I need it. Everyone, we'll come back to this match and finish up.
I'm off to ice my leg.
We got to go to practice. And we're back. Practice is over, and we're talking about the 2003 men's final. Novak Tsitsipas.
2003. Wow, we really went back in time, didn't we?
That's why you need to be here. I'm telling you, I need to sleep more. 2023. There should be beep, beep, beep. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was taking my PTR test in the 70s, Dennis Vandermeer pulled me out first. Steven, I am going to be your tester. And every time you make a mistake, I'm going to blow the whistle. And I'm telling you that whistle, like tweet, 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 tweet. Gotta love Dennis Vandermeer. Looping the ball. I'm just thinking that somebody would just listen to this. Yes, they said the Nalbandian was better than Federer and Nadal. No, on a given day, Emilio Sanchez said, on a given day, he's the best player in the world. But I thought looping, Novak backed up. And it didn't happen very much. He didn't, as far as Tsitsipas doing that. And I always talk about a tape I have of the late Nick Bollettieri with the young Andre Agassi. And Agassi talks about arcing the ball, which Bud Collins gave the name Moonball from watching Harold Solomon back in the 70s. But Agassi said, you arc one ball, they back up, the trajectory makes the ball bounce up high, ball's above their shoulder, then you look at a step in on the next ball. I think that's a great drill for, goal-oriented players coming up and say, okay, loop one, drive one, loop one, drive one. With the interpretation of the match, what would you say? What do you think overall? You talked about different commentators. What do you think that overall, Joe Public would say that what was the nuts and bolts of the match, the X's and O's?
What would Joe Public say?
Yeah,
I think Joe Public would say that Stefanos has no chance because of a one-handed backhand, which
no, that's why I asked.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, even Federer goes out there and slams his own one-handed backhand, where it basically says that if he can go back in time, he'd play two-handed. But I don't think it's necessarily the fact that he has a one-handed backhand as much as the things that we were talking about earlier, where his inability to hit an underspin backhand and his inability or his lack of desire maybe to come forward.
I'll tell you a story. One of my millionaire friends helped me sit down and talk to a billionaire at that time, trying to buy the Vic Braden Library, the archive that needed to be saved. And the Tennis Channel now has control of that. So the billionaire said he would have really done it if he was younger. And I was asking him, not when he was in his 70s, but if he was in his 50s, what have you. Gentleman loves tennis. Darren Cahill, the Australian, I think he does a very good job as a commentator. He went to spend some time, 2 days. No, I did more than 2 days just to go and coach the billionaire. So Darren Cahill goes, and the billionaire says, "What do you charge?" He says, $150,000 a day. The billionaire says, that's awful expensive. And the billionaire says, I'll tell you what, or no, excuse me, Cahill, kick me again. Cahill says, I'll tell you what, I'll come for 2 days and you pay me whatever you want, whatever you think I'm worth. So he goes for 2 days and he gets paid $150,000. I go, I'm paid $1,500 a day plus expenses. But one thing, why that comes to my mind is Cahill, when he was there, according to the billionaire, said, you're crazy to play with a one-handed backhand today. You have to have a two-handed backhand. What do you think of that?
I mean, if anything, I think if you were to see more serve and volleyers, maybe. But, I mean, it just seems like we were talking about we were talking about Wawrinka earlier. And I always think, when I think of Wawrinka, I immediately think of Magnus Norman. And I always try to think about what were the big changes that Norman did to his game when he tagged on, because, I mean, unless I'm way off, I mean, I don't. Wawrinka wasn't even a top 10 player whenever they started together. So, and then, you know, in the span of a couple of years, he's winning slams. So, I always think back to like what was done to make him a slam champion, and you know, the one thing that I always think about when it comes to Wawrinka is the one spot where Federer kind of abuses him all the time, where he would serve and volley all the time with his forehand and prevent him from like chipping the return back. But he became so good at like blocking the return back deep because nobody would serve and volley. And he was basically always able to, let's say, come over the backhand, but he'd be able to float the return back. Where I think you mentioned earlier with Federer and Sampras. Back in that match in 2001, you could not float back a return. They pounce on it immediately. But nowadays, you can. So it's going back to the 2 versus 1. It almost seems like you've gone the other way. So I'm kind of interested why Cahill feels that it's completely obsolete.
I mean, people just turning coin. Maybe it's because he coached Agassi for a while and just watched him hit two-handed backhands. We just came from practice, and we had 3 players that are based in Belgium. Two are from Belgium, one is from France, but they're training in Belgium. They're here. 2 of them are on their way to play college tennis, and then the third one is looking to get connected. So I said, hey, let's talk about how you pronounce David's last name, Goffin. I mean, that guy's game is so simple. Then I say, hey, tell me something about Kleister. Somebody tell me something about Justine Henin. You know, to me, I think that players don't really have an appreciation for the history of the game. And Justine Henin, she played against the big mamas. You know, she played against Venus and Serena and Davenport. And, so I think it's like anything. If someone really wants to work on the one-handed backhand and they're committed to it, I always tell kids, if you want to play a one-handed backhand, you can, but you're just going to have to work and work and work. And I do think that the learning curve, you know, my experience, I would say that, you know, people can improve a two-handed backhand faster than they can improve a one-handed backhand. A lot of kids that play one-handed, they end up running around it, they end up chipping. With the serve and volley, you know, there was not one attempt in the match. Was it 206 points? You just think to do it randomly, a sneak attack, just to throw the returner off.
Right.
I just think that's a mixed message. And again, it's not telling you, okay, you guys are playing to be the number 1 player in the world. But it's just, to me, for juniors watching that, say, well, no, I've got to work on this, I've got to work on that.
It worried me when you mentioned that I was trying to think off the top of my head, is really serve and volley tennis dead with once Ram and is done playing? I mean, I started trying to think off the top of my head who are the serve and volleyers out there.
Max Cressy, and I think even though he has such a big serve, people tell me all the time, and I had a chance to spend a little time with him.
I was talking about that.
Oh, in doubles, okay. But even with, just to finish on that thought with Cressy, is that, I mean, I just think that's wrong that it's like, well, there's only one guy serving volley now if Lopez is in the mix.
Right.
And it's not just because he has a big serve. It's because he serves and volleys. And, you know, we always tell people you need 2 things to be a serve and volley. You need a serve and a volley, And if you don't serve and volley, you don't serve and volley. I think this is a point to make on the match. The horizontal release with Tsitsipas, almost was it 22 to 42 unforced errors. We're always asking kids, were you early or late when they miss a forehand? And they just almost always say late. I go, no, you were early. Just think about where the strings were facing. And that's where people get stuck, and they watch the pros, and they make the mistake of the recovery is the follow-through. You can't see the follow-through with the human eye. But I do think that Tsitsipas, that's something else. The juniors, those are aspiring to play college tennis or beyond, they need to understand lifting versus pulling, and that forehand should feel like a lift. Never force the wrist, which is so common now.
It was interesting that I want to say it was in the last podcast, that you referenced Bill Jacobson, and where in the 18s it was like a 35% aggression and 10% should be rally errors.
Yeah.
And just in the match here with Stefanos, it might have been almost the exact opposite in numbers. It was more 10% aggression as far as outside of the serve. Obviously, he's getting a huge advantage on the serve, but when he did get the upper hand, but it's very rare that he was actually consolidating that serve. It seemed like too often that they were getting involved in rallies, which is, if you're Novak, I would assume you'd feel like you're going to win that rally more often than not. Like I said, going back to that point you made about rallies above nine strokes, interesting that was, I'm assuming, going to be a lot more in the pocket. So versus these where he's creating an angle and opening up an angle. With
watching the condensed version, narrating it while some goal-oriented juniors are watching, hey, that ball you could take out of the air. For the listeners, a conventional approach volley is a linear pattern. And what I was saying about the Spanish system, in Federer not getting as close to the net, is many times on a swing volley, they're stopping. You can generate more force when you use the ground, where you're not using a momentum source of power, but a rotational source of power. But I think that's also something to mention too, is that it's not just serve and volley. Was there approach volleys, conventional or swinging, or then was it approach shots? How many different patterns could be played? And to me, there was no mixing it up. The thing with Bill Tilden, match play, spin of the ball, you never change a winning game, but you always change a losing game. And I do think, hey, losing two tiebreakers, winning 45% of the points, hey, I'm in this. I'm close. I maybe here, maybe there. On one podcast, I heard someone say, you can't wait for Novak to miss. And one of the Macaros, I think it was Patrick, but you got to step up and force them to miss. You really don't know a shot is really inefficient until you test it, until you apply pressure. And it's pretty easy to see if you really know technique. Well, look at the hitting zone, racket face is open. Just look how they finish. The racket's not tracking out towards the target. But then if people pressure, then how can they do consistently? Can they make the calculations to hit the shot?
It's interesting you say that about Patrick McEnroe, because I can visualize him pressing the issue with his two-handed backhand and being able to come forward off that shot and finish up at net, where it's hard for Tsitsipas to do that. He doesn't have, let's say, like a Connor's approach shot on either side, right? Like it's a club. He's basically going to club the ball. And basically, if you were to show anybody a Connor's forehand approach, they'd say, oh, that's old school. That wouldn't work in today's game. And yeah, granted, maybe Tsitsipas can't do that with his own forehand, but that doesn't mean that it's a shot that's not possible for a modern. I know you hate that word modern, but the player of today.
I was talking to a coach yesterday, and he said some of the coaches working at the same facility he's at, they look at what we do and they say it's antiquated, old school. With Patrick, he's a very solid player. A lot of people take their shots, because his brother was in the main draw, or for his brother to come and play the tournament, they would give Patrick a wild card. But the guy played at Stanford, and he won a French title playing doubles. I'm going to throw it out there.
Got to the semis of the Australian in singles.
28 in the world. That's the number I'm guessing. That's just out of the sky. I have no idea. But he was ranked. And there was 3 other marquee names, and he had the great line.
Right.
It's just what you expected.
Mandel, Becker, and Edberg.
Yeah,
and a McEnroe.
There you go. I think I'll touch upon too, not playing doubles. The Grand Slams you play every other day. It happened way back when. Jimmy Connors, people don't realize it. He won Wimbledon and the U.S. Open with Nastase. With Ove Bingston, Borg, teenager, they win the Davis Cup. But then when money came into tennis, big money, they stopped playing. They stopped playing doubles.
With Kyrgios winning it the year before, I was trying to think of who was the last guy that literally played both and went deep in both. And the only name I could think of was McEnroe, and the year that he played with Steek. I think it was like 92. I think he won it.
Oh, he did. That was his last Grand Slam.
That was, I think, the year he lost in the semis to Agassi. So, I mean, and that back then seemed like a real effort to play both events because it's best of 5 in doubles. It'd be kind of curious for a guy like Kyrgios going out there playing best of 3 in doubles. Is it really that tiring? Versus, go catch a Nadal practice session. That looks way more tiring to me.
Coming back to Patrick, though, one thing I was going to say is when he played tennis, he was solid. It was not like, okay, this was his weapon. He was just solid, and he could construct a point and get in. With money, if money was in doubles, if there was a bonus pool for the player that had the best combined ranking, you can name a lot more women than you can men that have done well in both. But Edberg and McEnroe have a record for being number 1 in both. And it wouldn't be great if there was a way to have the top players play doubles. I think it would be great for the game. I think it'd be great for the game to have someone like a Federer. Granted he's older. Okay, I've got enough money in the bank, and I've done this and done that. Now I need some time to have a private life with my family. But I guarantee that if Federer was showing up to play doubles, they'd be selling tickets.
Absolutely. I was thinking that when in the Laver Cup last year, and where I thought it was obvious that his career was over. I was kind of thinking, imagine if he just did his own little doubles tour. It would be packed. It'd be 100% packed, and it's a shame that actually doubles is an afterthought, because it's, personally, I find it to be a little bit more entertaining now than the singles.
Yeah, now here's an idea for the world of tennis is pickleball. There has to be another sport called tickleball. And, hey, we're going to go play, but you have to serve. You have to hit a serve. And you're going to serve volley and say, okay, let's use this for fun. And instead of be pickle, we'll just drop the P and add T for tennis. Bobby Fischer. Mention Bobby all the time. I know Andrew Rube mentioned the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. Chess. It's a chessboard. And the different moves. Fischer, he dropped out of school. He was so intelligent, but he learned 6 languages so he could read books on chess. But you play the board. You don't play the opponent. You play the chessboard. The chess player is staring at the board. And I think also too, in going through this with we mortals, that there should be no awe factor. You should be able to watch the best players in the world and say, okay, you can be critical. Just like a football team, Vince Lombardi, the Green Bay Packers win on Sunday, and then they watch the film, and the late Max McGee goes, I thought we won that game. So there's no awe factor, but I do think that chessboard mentality, I mean, it's there has to be different patterns that are working out. I think if people went back and were to read Bill Talbert's book, we wrote one on singles and doubles, great book on tactics. We touched upon this with Tsitsipas, his toss. It's a double whammy. He could serve even better placement, more speed, more accuracy, but then how he ends up off balance with But I think, again, the listeners going back, how does that front foot spins out? When you think of play site, what comment would you make? What comes to your mind when you think of those machines? They look like ATM machines, sophisticated training device.
I've only really gotten to use it as far as getting the actual video of the match. I've never really gotten the stats from the match. I thought it's phenomenal as far as when I couldn't go to an event, kids could send me the link and I can follow the match from my phone. But I don't know the extent of that technology as far as what it gives you. I mean, I know that I'm sure that, they're going to maybe randomly say that you hit X shot 70 miles an hour. Just don't know what that really means. I mean, it's one of the interesting things you mentioned earlier is the average speed of the first serve was 114, I think, for both, 113 for one, 114 for the other. I mean, I wonder if really listeners can realize that each of those guys can probably go off and top off at 135. They're not banging serves with all-out power every single time, if ever. And I just don't think juniors realize that. I mean, I see so many kids go out there and just try to muscle serves, and they're probably serving at 30% for a match, where 114 on average. Sure, they're going to randomly be in the 120s, or sometimes going to be in the low 100s, but it's a lot more about being able to hit various spots off the same toss, and trying to keep guys off balance. So it was interesting in the feed that I was listening to when Tsitsipas got broken in the first set. I don't know if it was Fitzgerald or Masur or somebody that basically said he's already exhausted his options on the second serve. Like, basically, there's only so many times he could go second serve to the forehand, and I guess he was sitting on the second serve to the backhand. So, didn't even, like you mentioned, didn't even think about coming forward. Never even crossed his mind probably to serve and volley. I don't think he did it once in the entire match.
No, that's a good point. This is something now for the listeners. We tell people, if you try to hit the ball hard, you won't hit it right. But if you try to hit the ball right, you'll be able to hit the ball hard. At one point, there was a research project where the ground strokes were at a greater speed on the Challenger Tour than the ATP. And the response was, yeah, that's why they're playing at the Challenger level. They don't have as much spin, they don't have as much control, they're just banging it.
We're talking about Philippoussis. I remember a great tennis article, probably in the late 90s. Everybody was talking about the rackets this, the rackets that's the reason for all the power. And they had him go out there with his racket, and he served 130. And I think he served with a wooden racket and was serving like 122. So it was a lot more to his generation, the way he generated power than just the rackets, I think.
With tennis analytics, our listeners, we have a podcast with Warren Pretorius, a bright mind, intellectual. You hear the term great tennis mind. We have to go back to grip, swing, and body. Those are the numbers that we have to cover. And with Tsitsipas, I don't think that there's really any major overhauls in his game technically. It's not that difficult to start to toss to the right. It's not that difficult to maintain your body balance where at the impact point, all your energy is going up and out at a 45 for him to the right net post. Just a racket head awareness to flatten out the racket face. Most people miss volleys because the racket face is open. They miss volleys because they don't move through it. They don't have momentum. They're moving laterally. They're not moving forward or even a diagonal, which is still forward with, the arm position on his backhand. But that's one thing with PlaySight. It's an amazing training tool, but it's not telling you, the angle of the racket face. The grip determines the angle of the racket face, the angle of the racket. Let me get this right. The grip determines the angle of the racket face, and the angle of the racket face determines the angle of the racket path. Hitting zone. This is something we ask people, juniors that they're back here to visit. We've known it. Let me just go this way. Hey, I've known you for 5 years. Where do I get 34 feet? And when you pull horizontally, you hit the side tee, the intersection of the single side line and the service line. By the way, on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, it used to say at the bottom of one clip, mistake, I say 69.5, but it's 65.9. So we just round that off to 66. And you go cross court, it's 82.5, we round that off to 83. Now the pure mathematicians, it doesn't calculate, so it's not exactly this way, but just for the sake of trying to get your point across, to hit through the court, keep the opponent between the extended single lines, the second bounce, they're going to be, as Aggies would say, keep them in the pocket. So it's 17 feet this one way, and that's ball length, and it comes back 17. It's 34 feet of ball length. And that's where, would make it a running match, where Tsitsipas was saying, okay, I'm going to move east and west and say, I'm looking to come in. I'm going to pressure you at the net. And again, coming back to the crystal ball, he did lose. And if he went in and said, hey, your career, for you to win slams, you got to add this to your game. You got to add this to your game, and you're looking to keep him centered in the first opportunity to go in. It's just amazing, we're talking about, 6-3, 3-all, first overhead for Tsitsipas. Next point is first volley. But to get past, and you said, a lot of juniors, they don't like being passed. It comes down to Federer. Federer would say, I always believe in my forehand more than my volleys. So it's so important, and that's where the parents of young children is little kid tennis and big kid tennis are two different sports. And we always say winning's not confusing, it's totally confusing. They're usually winning, but they're winning the wrong way. And what you said about Bill Jacobson with the 18s, if they were to be forcing at 35% and then unforced is 10, I mean, those are unbelievable numbers. Most matches are just, it's home run derby from the baseline and, say 40-40. And that could be a compliment. 80% of the points are ending as an unforced error. They don't put themselves in a position to have the angle to hit a winner.
The only one that I feel like that I'm seeing now that I see could potentially play like a ideal game plan against a Novak is Shapovalov. I mean, he's I watched him play where I guess he lost to Khachanov, and I always thought he had an issue as far as breaking serve, and I mean, he put one loose game there in the fifth set. I really thought the guy would have been fun to watch because at least you see him randomly come forward. I know, was it Jimmy Arias? They went off and said that he doesn't volley well, but
oh yeah, Arias, he's a guy. I don't.
He puts himself in the right positions.
Upstate New York boy, gotta love Buffalo, Pagula, Buffalo, where the real people are from. So he said, Shapovalov, I love it. He loves to go to the net. He's in. He's looking to be aggressive. He doesn't know what to do when he gets there. That's what he said. Yeah. Paraphrasing, but he was with Richard Hernandez. He was at the club Richard was based at for Dennis and his mother. There 10 years, and it was just the racket faces open on the volleys. They need to go. I mean, but go to YouTube, plug in Shapovalov, age 8, court 19, and you see this kid going forward. Basics turn into instincts. The kid was going forward from the get-go. But yeah, racket head awareness, he could just square out that racket face. And then also, too, is if people could just say, if I can just go in and make the first volley, singles or doubles, you just make one volley and it just jumps way up as far as your chance of winning points. But with us and with junior players, yes, total respect for these two great champions. Superhumans, very, very high skill level. But yeah, let's just take a second look. And I do think that the parents, especially, they'll be confused as well because, hey, we're watching the very best players in the world, and that's not the game anymore. That was then, this is now, and this is how you play. Warrior mentality, physical specimen. With repeating myself for our listeners, in junior tennis, it's the same as little kid soccer. In little kid soccer, the goalies are the only place they're the only ones that know where to be. Then it's a cluster of 20 people. And that was the number one pattern for Tsitsipas is to run around the backhand. Here's something to ask you to speculate, reflect, and it sounds like an insult, but how could Federer have won more majors? How could these players win more majors? Again, why did the big three win? It's so difficult to take 3 sets from them. I mean, if the majors were 2 out of 3, the guys wouldn't have as many.
Right.
Greater chance for an upset when you reuse the scoring system. That's where I think when these young players are playing a 10-point tiebreaker, it's not a true match.
Yeah, I read I heard somewhere where, I don't know if it was Federer or maybe it was Nadal that said the reason we're good at 5 sets is because we've played way more of them. And I guess they kind of came in, well, Federer was definitely around, but basically around the area where Masters finals were at least played best of 5 finals, where Davis Cup matches were best of 5 finals, or best of 5 set matches. I see a lot of guys that might come onto tour and that basically have never really played that many 5s. Kind of what makes what Alcaraz did last year at the U.S. Open so amazing, because he basically, for however old he is, 18, 19, he's built like a truck, that kid.
The question, how could have any of these players won? How could Tsitsipas have won? I mean, he's so great. I mean, to be on that stage, and what he had to do and his family to be on that stage. But how does someone go from an 11 to be a 13 in the UTR? At practice, these three boys from Belgium, 18, 19, 20 years of age, and it does come up, well, okay, what's their UTR? And the one service of many of the UTR offers is you can go to their website. I've never done this, but I've asked people to do it, and print out a list, if say a young gal is a 7.5 and the guy is a 9.5, what schools can they play at? What colleges could they play at right now? Where would they be in the lineup? But how do you become an 11 to a 13? I don't like the term greatest of all time, but it's probably a much better argument that when it comes to flexibility, it comes to nutrition, there's a number of things that Djokovic might be the most flexible, hydrated athlete that's played tennis. It's just one thought of many. But how do you improve your UTR?
Well, that's the most common answer people say is matches, and it seems silly to me that people think that. Not only that, people make way too much to do of one particular match. Generally, unless they've changed the algorithm as of late, I know it was based on the last 30 matches. So
it reminds me, I have to get back to someone. I was just asked, should my child delete their name from the UTR? And was in the question is that once you do that, you can't rejoin. And I said, my answer would be no, don't do that, because that people are going to read the wrong messages into that. The dad just feels like the child is, and this is like everybody. So people go, who's he talking about? Everybody. They're just obsessed. How can they improve their UTR? I'm saying, sleep patterns, journaling, everything. It's all encompassing how to improve your UTR. But you're going to go down before you go up. That's another thing is that Tsitsipas, it's game time. Okay, I got to go with my best. But I still think he plays well enough where he needed to have more net appearances. He needed, no risk, no reward. He needed to say, I'm going to come in. I'm going to make you pass me.
Yeah, so that goes back to my point as to why I was dumbfounded when I watched him play doubles in Miami, knowing the guy's pretty comfortable once he's at net. Why he's so reluctant to do so. So I obviously mentioned his toss and his left foot on the serve, potentially putting him a step or so behind. But even then, oftentimes he's a step behind in the baseline rallies. You're curious why it's okay one way and not okay the other.
With kid plays 6-3, 6-3, and he wins. Loses 6-3, 6-3. To me, they play the same way. Oh, I had a great day. No, you play the same. When you start to look at the stats, it's just that you played somebody who missed more than you. PJ Domdo. came over with Raven Klaassen, and I was at a futures with him. He's so excited that he qualified, and then he lost once he got in the main draw of futures. I said, you played the same way in every match. You won in the qualies. You played the same way, and then you got to the main draw and you played the same way. You play all 4 matches the same. It didn't matter whether you won or you lost. But he was, he was also ranked very high. They were ranked 1 and 2 when those 2 young guys came over, and he won. And that's where, say for example, if you really study Braden, and you go to a match, it's hard to really enjoy it. You're out there watching kids play, and it's like, oh,
Who was it that said there was a Chad that said that you ruined it for me?
Yeah, Chad Berryhill, St. Leo, Dave Secker, NC State. Dave Secker's a younger coach. He meets Berryhill, and he goes, and Secker's just making conversation. Oh, Steve, and Berryhill goes, he ruined it for you too. Just see, when you see somebody that hitting the ball poorly, to me, it's like taking fingernails across the blackboard. It's like, oh. But that's where many, many coaches, lucky for them, they're not zoned in on technique. So that's where they can go out and be their practices are go, 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 because they're not slowing down to work on technique. With walking in to start the second half of this podcast, a coworker told me J.J. Wolf beat Tsitsipas. Or excuse me, J.J. Wolf does have a win over Tsitsipas, doesn't he?
I think it was in Miami, yeah.
Yeah, so another kick me under the table is that J.J. Wolf just beat TFO. Okay, let's confirm. Let's confirm that, but if people were to watch the movement of J.J.'s volleys, he's not going forward enough either. And Ty Tucker made so many nice comments about him. He's not going forward enough either. Really, when you say, okay, come on, how many net appearances are there? But the mechanics of his volleys have improved so much. So what I would do is say, JJ, you need to go back to Germany and get on the court with Fitzel and do these drills. And then every day, so okay, Andy's not traveling with you, but when you practice every day, it's like, my son was playing a few years, and I said, every day, just ask the person you're playing with, hey, can we play 2 games of ghost doubles? And the guys will say, yeah, sure. You might have to explain to them cross-court, one-on-one, serve, go forward. Okay, we just play 2 games of that. And, when you watch people practice, it's like they're not really planning for the future. Okay, I'm going to have to be able to come in. There's going to be a green light point. It's going to be a short ball. So it's not a matter of just technique. It's a matter of application. It's, okay, we need to do these tactical drills. And you need to do them every day. You need to do them every day. I mean, do kids get together and go to the park and say, hey, let's play a set, got to serve and volley both times. And we're not good enough. We'll take the return to the middle. Oh, we're going to play a set, but the server has to come in. We have to return right to them. They play a volley and we play it out. And Einstein, imagination is greater than knowledge. People just play practice sets like who's going to be the king or queen for the day. And there's really no thought in it. You mentioned this. I had it in my notes. So we don't have to say much about it. But the Jimmy Connors match, Bill Reardon, the late Bill Reardon, Jimmy Connors' agent. I don't believe that it happened, but when Jimmy came off the court from beating Rosewall, I beat him at Wimbledon, 74, then at the US Open in 74. He said, get me Laver. And Laver was almost retired. And then they were winner-take-all matches. We found out later they weren't winner-take-all, but...
So it's not confirmed. It's just rumor has it?
No, it came out later that it wasn't winner-take-all.
No, I'm talking about the Get Me Laver.
Yeah. That was all the showmanship. That was I want to go with facts, but my opinion would be no, that it was hype, and like boxing, let's make this happen. And it was so exciting back in those days. But I remember Jimmy Connors, it was Las Vegas, and the altitude's not that high, but it's high enough where, and Laver agreed that all tennis ball cams would be open 2 days before.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because, Rocket's going to rocket it. His nickname, even though he's from Rockhampton, his brothers You know, the Aussies give you those nicknames. He got that nickname because he was tiny tyke, and they teased him out. He couldn't hit the ball very hard. You know, yeah, grass was a different era. The rackets, we touched upon the grass, talked about the doubles. This is something you and I've talked about before. Sabatini, not the Argentinian, but the Argentine. I was corrected on that.
Argentinian. It's fine.
That's fine. It's okay. I was corrected
You just got confused with a certain #1 college player, and you thought she was from Argentina when in fact she was from Spain.
Who's that? Tell me that. Another fact
That was
checker.
I can't remember her name now, but she played #1 for University of Miami.
Oh yeah. I enjoyed watching her play.
watched her
Small
play.
gal. So again, she was from Spain, and I had it backwards.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's because I thought she played like Vilas. I got excited. But she was Sabatini, the beautiful Sabatini, in the finals of the French at 15. She got the 9 semifinals. She won 1 final.
Finals of the French at 15. Juniors.
We'll have to check that fact checker.
I don't remember her ever getting to the French final.
Period.
I know she got to Wimbledon final. I know she won an Open.
She won the U.S. Open, but yeah, I mean, I looked it up quickly. But 9 semis, 1 final. Yeah, I have to check that. But the point being is she won Grand Slam, and I don't think it's nice when people say Andy Roddick, 1 slam wonder. I mean, come on, you're an awesome tennis player. It's like Kornikova. That her bio is amazing. She was a great tennis player.
That's a 1 in the world in doubles, right?
Yeah, and she won majors as well. Mostly I think with Hingis, but she changed her tactics. And I know we talked about Jim Lair was working with Sabatini. What was the name of the coach who was working with her?
Carlos Kiermaier.
Brazilian, yeah. And but that to me was the same thing. Is that Tsitsipas playing Djokovic, Sabatini playing Graf.
Exactly. That's actually a great point because she had a losing record. I mean, maybe it wasn't as lopsided as 10-2, but or 2-10. But basically, yeah, it's true. She came in, hit underspin approach, come in, and yeah, it's actually a great comparison.
Well, that's where the great Bud Collins, he was an encyclopedia. But to me, I think it was lopsided. We'll have to go back. I always talk about Jack Kramer. This gal, Sabatini, was so athletic. And that's where kids could look it up.
Maybe lopsided as far as in the slams and stuff, but I'm sure. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to look that up, but I feel more confident with that one than I do the.
Yeah, I'm not confident with
French final.
Now that you said that.
French final, I'm pretty confident on.
Maybe I think that I would guess at least she played the French. She was in the draw at 15.
I mean, she might have been in the draw even younger.
But
back then they could play.
But when she was basically #2 in the world for a long time behind Graf, that's where Jack Kramer said, "Hey, if I were her, I'd find a junior coach and rebuild your game." And that was said on TV. Then Braden said, "I know just a guy," and I was so flattered by that. But then can you get someone like that to listen to you? But what happens really at the pro level for the most part, it's a closed fraternity. And it's like, no, I think, I'd be very confident to say, yeah, Tsitsipas, I'm not looking for a job. Yeah, I think I could help you guys out. But it'd be more about the racket head. It'd be more about positioning. It'd be a matter of forcing. Like, you make these changes on your serve. If Tsitsipas's foot is going out to the opposite net post, he drifts to the left. And if someone's drifting to the left, it's going to be tough to serve and volley. But the Kramer mentality is, I don't want to be #2. Braden used to always tell a story about Jimmy Connors. Jimmy called up Mike Davies, who was running a tournament in Las Vegas at one point, and Connors goes, "Hey, I want to play," and Jimmy just asked, "How much for the winner?" And he answered me. He goes, "And the runner-up." He goes, and he just interrupted. He goes, "Not interested. Just what do you get if you win it?" It's like with I had the chance to talk to Donald Dell's daughter, Christina. And said, she said, have you heard of my father? He's a legend. Amazing, this guy. So with Andy Roddick in Dell's book, he says that that he was getting like millions of dollars from Fila if he was in the, I don't know, top 5. You could read it. But if he drops out of the, top 20 or whatever, and he was getting peanuts, and Roddick said, if I drop out of top 20, I don't deserve a penny.
Who's getting?
Roddick.
Who was with Fila?
Roddick actually at one point was, maybe it was Lacoste.
Reebok?
No, he was the Reebok one early on, but he changed apparel. And
He changed to Lacoste at the end.
yeah, okay, the alligator, yeah, Fila, which stands for fell in love again, or F, I lost again. With the track, I gotta have you here every time when I do these things. Chris Everett said to young
So
Novak.
hold on, I'm going to interrupt here. So basically, last year at the French Open, the matches that I actually caught on, I forgot what app I used, but Sabatini came back and played in the Legends doubles with Gisela Lulco, and my college teammate and a former top 10 player were practicing in Miami, preparing them for doubles. And the weeks leading up to that, and I saw a video of them playing, and I was amazed at how well Sabatini still played tennis. I mean, and maybe she still hits more than I would imagine, but I know she was like a marathon runner and doing all this. I would assume that tennis was the last thing on her mind, but unbelievable how good she is at doubles. And I think Dulko was also number 1 in the world, but
No, it's like riding a bicycle.
and literally it looked almost better than what I see on.
Oh no, it's brain memory. Like Billie Jean King handed out the trophy for the women's match, and again, great respect for the players in the final of the women's. But from the service line in, Arthur Ashe used to call her the old lady. I saw her play at Wimbledon. From the service line in, there's no chance that the girls that are in the Aussie 2023 final are close to how Billie Jean King played from the service line in. It's just no way.
You could maybe even say for the men's as well from that weekend.
With one young gal that is listening to me, she knows Kathy Rinaldi because she's on the radar. I mean, she's ranked quite high in the early age groups, and I said, yeah, go to YouTube. People heard me say this before. Plug in Connors, Everett, Vince Van Patten, and Rinaldi, and that doubles. It was mixed doubles, and it's way better than they're playing today.
You got me to watch that.
Young Novak, Chris Everett, and asked him one time, "You are winning early rounds so convincingly. Don't you think you should add to your game?" And maybe that's why he's 122. He's just going to keep doing what he's doing because it's winning. But I think that's why parents should realize that your child, the formula, if they were to play 25% of their matches against lower ranked players, 50% in the middle, and 25% you're playing against players that are better than you. But so many kids they jump up in the age groups and they're always looking to play better players. Their parents during practice, who they're going to hit with. Huge mistake is, be able to just put the ball on a dime. And if you're playing 50%, but you can come in and you can tic-tac-toe. We do this with juniors, put 3 players out and 2 are going to play and 1 is just going to use the tally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and say, we want you to play and who can win the set hitting the least amount of shots. And the server should basically be playing 3 shots. If the returner does it right, they're playing 2. They can take that second serve and come in. With Pancho Gonzalez, we mentioned if you're holding serve. If you're holding serve, you can be much more aggressive. Coming back to one last thing I have is, I mentioned it earlier, Gonzalez. What would Gonzalez say about it? What would Pancho Seguro say about it? And, that's where, Bobby Fischer reading 6 books or learning 6 different languages to read books written on chess. I don't think that type of homework's done in tennis. But with Seguro, I was like, okay, what did he want Jimmy Connors to do? Play the ball on the rise. He's a little guy. Help me out. Ecuador? Pancho Seguro, Ecuadorian.
What about him?
But no, the little guy, but that's where he's from. Just, I don't want to get the country wrong, but.
No, he's from Ecuador.
So, okay, so I get that right. Bingo. I'm 10%,
That you're asking me
11%.
of another player from Ecuador.
But with that is you have to be able to neutralize. You got to be able to hit the return and make them volley. You know, a lot of people are taught to hit with a really strong continental grip, open racket face, make them volley. You know, hit right at them. You know, I think that Kramer, you know, first opportunity to get in. I mean, how many approach shots did you hit? How many volleys did you hit? To me, I've charted so many matches with juniors that, you know, you played 100 points and you didn't hit one overhead. You played 100 points and we can count how many volleys you hit on just one hand. So then you just think, okay, these players are watching these legends of the game, the best in the world. And, you know, I think sometimes no thinking outside the box. I think we could repeat a few things, you know, with like what would a Bobby Riggs say? You know, people think of Bobby Riggs as the Joker because of, you know, he was the sugar daddy and playing, you know, all the things he did with the Battle of the Sexes in '73. But take speed off a shot. Take speed off a shot. And with tennis analytics, or what would reviewing this podcast, what did Federer's father say? You're always a chicken. Hit your backhand. And if you take your own numbers, like say Lendl, baseliner, people have given that label, his own numbers indicated that he was really successful when he went in. And almost straight across the board, every level of tennis, people are very successful when they come in. You know, granted, you can't just, okay, I'm going in on everything.
Right.
But it has to be calculated with, but yeah, I just think that it's too much. Well, the game has changed so much, equipment, you know, and the athletes are bigger, stronger, faster. But no, I do think that some old school needs to come back into tennis. Anyway, those are some thoughts. What do you want to close out on with this match?
I don't know about the match. You did ask me to read you something from this mug here that you have. Very stylish mug.
Omar, great friend of the podcast, great guy. His young daughter is getting much better in tennis. Read us the quote from that Nadal mug.
Let's read. He was better than me tonight. That's the sport. At no point here do I see, but my UTR says I should have won.
With Nadal, I mean, you just got to listen to Nadal. With what's your goal? That my next practice is going to be my very best practice. And there's a guy who really closes in. He almost has a forehand grip on the backhand volley. That's something that in doing these podcasts have to be corrected, which is great.
Yeah, Andy said that it's more common.
Yeah, he's right, 100%. Is that, yeah, that's right. You know, yeah, more kids have a composite, close to a forehand grip on the forehand volley. They're trying to volley on the backhand instead of the forehand volley. But then in the end, they don't even volley.
I mean, they think the composite is a continental.
Yeah, but if
because then they'll serve with the composite as well.
No, and that's true. That's another thing too. In junior tennis, more kids serve with a composite, and they try to volley with a continental. Things are backwards, upside down, inside out. But he works the ball so deep through the center. I mean, high and heavy, tons of spin. But Nadal is so good at closing in. He is so good at closing in. And, I think also, too, is that when you think about comparing players with, and Agassi says this quite well, when, Agassi, when he first got on the scene, he was losing to Lendl. And, every champion has their day. So also, too, the age of the players. The age of the players. I do think that Djokovic, if I were to make one comment, people hear this, and maybe they only hear part of this, but if you go back to the condensed match of 2014, and then I think that Tsitsipas can say, I'm going to look at Wawrinka's game and say, okay, he's staying closer to the baseline, he's hitting more backhands, and it was so many more net appearances. You can go down to the percentage of points, and we did that, whether it's, the numbers were very low. and we did well coming to the net with was it just the volleys, or do you consider when you approach as a net appearance? And that's where you just have to be consistent. But if you don't go to the net in the 10s, you don't go to the net in the 12s, you're not going in. You got to start early, unless you're really, really coachable. I think I like the definition of the coach, where the coach can bring a great story out of the player that the player would not bring out themselves. And do they really listen? And I think that most kids, it's the score. Is win, win, win. And they're not looking at the beauty of the game. They're not looking at making their game a masterpiece. They're not looking at, I'm just starting this journey out. And when you stop and you think, players are playing, well into their 30s. So some kid's 12 years old and go, well, when you're 32, that's 20 years from now.
You're kind of predicting Novak is going to be like Tom Brady.
What's his word? It's not supple. Pliable? What's his word? In this book, TB12.
Oh, I've heard it.
I really do think that his body will allow him to play much longer. And that's where people have said that for a while with Djokovic. Excuse me, with Nadal. That, but he loves it, and it's like he's hobbling away from this year's Australian Open. But I just think with the flexibility, the movement, looks like the guy's made out of rubber. With Tsitsipas, hey, those guys, who were they? Let them go sit in Section F and eat popcorn. But it's not so much for Tsitsipas, but it's for the people that are listening to our podcast. But I use my name in third person. Once again, it's not Steve Smith stuff. It's like, okay, we have this library, and I was fortunate enough to hang out with this coach and this coach and this coach, and I think of a Welby Van Horn. We asked Manny Diaz on a podcast, who has great respect for one of his students, John Isner, Pernfors, who did quite well. They both played at Georgia. And I said, who wins? Who's more competitive? But Isner, who's still playing, such a beautiful serve, really has a height advantage. And on our podcast, Manny Diaz said, because I asked him, I said, well, what would have happened if Isner was taught the volleys the way Welby taught the volleys? And he just said, he'd have millions and millions of more dollars. I saw there's a podcast with Sam Querrey. Poor Sam Querrey. Everybody likes Sam Querrey, but I remember watching him when he was 14 years old. And what a great player. And he had a great career, made a lot of money. I remember telling the people at the USTA at one time, there's obviously a change in the guard here and there, but the Sam Querreys of the future, are they going to be able to volley? And, like an Isner serving and staying back. But he did that when he was younger. And then the college coaches, hats off to the college coaches, they're inheriting. Their incoming freshmen, for the most part, have no idea how to play doubles. No idea. Tomorrow I'll be at the Battle of Boca. There's like no doubles being played. And one of the college coaches asked if one of our players could play doubles. I said, well, let me talk to him. I said, we work on doubles every day, but the entry fee is almost the same. And no one's signing up. And I like how you said it. Would you call it an afterthought?
Yeah, it's crazy that it's unfortunate that Ed Kress is one-on-one
doubles.
It's a shame that hasn't picked up, and pickleball's thriving because it's his idea is it's such a great game to play that way. So.
No, and I with the pickleball, where I see people, what do I know about pickleball? But it's just like tennis in the 70s. There's all these teaching pros, and they're just making it up. They're just winging it. Now the PTR, the USPTA, come on, guys. Overnight, you're pickleball experts. And Chuck Gill told me many years ago, he goes, and he's been the president of USPTA, and I know he's done a lot with the USTA, maybe his thoughts have changed, but he was saying it's just a great casual sport. But again, with pickleball, hey, let's get out there and play with the service motion. Let's play with the split step.
I have an open mind. I have a former player of mine she's on TV all the time, and I try to watch it, but it's hard to watch. I can't really get into it. So, but then I can say the same thing about the men's tennis also. I mean, I watched both final. I watched the women's final actually. I woke up and I caught the third set of the women's final. I found it to be great. I thought it was a great third set and had zero interest to watch almost the men's final. At least at that hour, I figured I'd watch it later. But it reminded me.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, well,
reminded me of the Andy Murray Novak matches. It was like almost watching paint dry to me. I liked having like the contrast in styles, and you had that with Federer, you had that with Nadal. You didn't, but you have two guys that almost play the same way. It's and then you could even make the same argument. I mean, what's Murray's record against Novak? I mean, it's pretty lopsided as well. And
I mean, I don't know, but I think of Murray having lots of wins over the big three and just having some bad luck with.
Lots of wins. I mean, he definitely had wins, but I mean, I feel like it's almost an insult to the big three to call it the big four, because Stan almost deserves to be in that as much in the conversation as Murray, because they're pretty lopsided on the top three, 22, 22, 20, and then we got like, again, I'm not minimizing what they've accomplished, but.
Yeah, but I think it was probably one of the best things about the Australian Open when Murray goes, I've got a big heart. And he looks like he's playing on one leg out there. I mean, that guy is amazing. So
I actually caught both his matches. I was flying back from Colombia, and then I leave to the airport. Those early flights of 4 a.m. matches come in handy.
with the word natural, I know that Jan Tiriac, you were talking about Tiriac earlier, the Romanian, the character, knows how to say I'm innocent in 14 languages. But Tiriac doesn't let people use the word talent. Many football coaches don't use the word potential. Bear Bryant, potential means you haven't done it yet. Potential means it's still in the bottle. But Braden didn't like the word natural. Oh, he's a natural volleyer. He said nobody's natural. But to say that when you can go and look at the match with 2014 Australia, the Australian with Novak was coming in a ton, but he doesn't look that natural coming in. He could get better at it. And I think the parents listening for your kid, if your kid does it only in practice, that's not good. Practice like you play like you practice, and you have to go forward. The college coaches, 4 years is a long time. Junior college, I heard so many junior college coaches say, well, we only have for 2 years, so we can't really make any changes. No, this is how you're doing it now. You need to make these adjustments. Back in the day of disco dancing, this is how you do it. Disco here and disco there. Boom, boom. It's not that complicated. And
I missed that with the 75 Wimbledon final as well. Both I missed.
You missed the disco dancing. John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever. We're rambling on here. I hope you got something out of this podcast. Andres?
Steve, always a pleasure. Always fun to hang out with you for the day.
I love your warm-up. I don't know if I said that earlier. I think it's great to have you remind me of all these mistakes I'm making. But
you have to know a lot to forget a lot, so it's you're doing great.
Yeah.
I hope I have.
And then also these podcasts. I mean, just we're getting positive feedback on them. People are listening to them. And it's like, okay. I was told that maybe it's probably up by 1 million because it was a couple months I was told there's 2.5 million podcasts. Everybody
what was the other one
has a podcast.
The recent one that you had that the last name escapes me, Bud. The guy that was a coach at Brandeis. Bud Schultz.
Bud Schultz. His son is the coach at Brandeis.
So basically, he made me look back because they said Bobo Zivojanovic had won Wimbledon. I was like, don't think so.
I remember seeing Bobo play in juniors. We'll have to look that up.
That was a great. I mean, that was a great story. story that, you know, most people nowadays would probably say, oh, that can't happen to. Sure it can. Cat must have been a phenomenal athlete. I mean, playing various sports. I mean,
Well, it comes down to our new slogan.
what a story.
Our new slogan: strong fundamentals. Excuse me. Solid fundamentals, strong character. No, you know, he was a basketball player, and I mean, he's 6'4", and he's a jock, he's a specimen. But you know, it wasn't a ton of money spent on his game. I mean, he did go to Welby Van Horn's camp for a week. But no, what a story! I mean, I've got a lot of positive feedback on that podcast. There's, you know, I just said, hey, we got to talk to Bud. We'd like to this. You know, the other day, I give this assignment out quite often. Is people need to listen to the Eric Buterak TED Talk. Eric Buterak TED Talk. There's so much great stuff out there. So much great stuff out there. And there's only so many hours in the day. And again, we spend so much time with juniors that the juniors have to do their schoolwork. But if we were just to give them a little assignment here, a little assignment there to find more discipline, find more humility, that would all be good. All be good. Adios, amigos.
All right.
Andres.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, next time we'll do it in Spanish. ¿Cómo se llama?
It will last about 22 minutes instead.
It wouldn't last that long. It wouldn't last that long. All right, wave goodbye to the camera.
All right.
Adios. This class is over.